Welcome, everybody, to this, the latest, the greatest episode of SteeleWatching, the podcast for Remington Steele fans. My name is Eric, and I am one of your hosts.
And I am Sara, and I am trying to find me pot of gold.
Oh,
we're recording this on St. Patrick's Day, so I thought you won't hear this on St. Patrick's Day, so that reference will be lost unless I explain it. So we are.
Yes, I guess I should have gotten myself a bottle of Guinness, eh?
Oh, that would make this episode real interesting. By the end of the episode, he's like, what happened? I don't know. Some dreams.
No, it would take more than one bottle. I'm not that much of a lightweight. Anyway, where we were. Season 2, episode 18, Dreams of Steele. And let's see, were there any announcements we were going to make? No, I don't think so. Anyway.
I can't think of any.
So let's get on to the episode then. Stop wasting time. Dreams of Steele first aired March 20th, 1984. Written by Brian Allen Lane, which...
Pretty sure we've seen his name once or twice.
Yeah, that name is going to come up in a reference, I think. I'm pretty sure, not 100% positive, but I'm pretty sure it's going to come up later in a reference to a previous episode. Anyway, written by Brian Allen Lane, directed by Don Weiss. What?
I just said "daha" because I don't know, it sounded cool.
We're making noises like with our face now. Yes. Well, I for the story synopsis, I'm going to go primarily with the TV Guide listing, but I do want to reference the DVD liner notes. And once again, we thank our good friend and the generous author of Steele Loved After All These Years, Judith Moose, for this information. Thank you, Judith. If you don't have her book, go buy it. Yes, it's going to cost you $100 or more to get it off eBay or Amazon as a used thing, but yeah, it's worth it. Anyway.
Totally worth it.
TV Guide listing. The reputation of the agency is at stake when the rare gems Laura and Steele were hired to transport are switched with fakes en route to their destination. Okay, yeah, that's a pretty good summation. But the DVD liner notes has a reference that I think should have been made in the TV Guide listing. In an ironic twist, Remington and Laura are hired to transport the famous Royal Lavulite jewels. The same jewels Remington was trying to steal when he first met Laura. The fact that it's the Royal Lavulite, the same jewels that Remington was trying to steal when he first met Laura, that should have been in there, I think.
I think it probably wasn't because they wanted that to probably be the twist, the surprise. Like, I'm assuming that was supposed to be... that's what I would have assumed, but...
Yeah, I think...
It might draw more viewers if they put it there, though.
Yeah, and I think the reference of that to the Royal Lavulite, the original episode, would have been a little more intriguing. It's like, oh, we're going back there, eh?
Well, maybe that was also their aversion to continuity-based TV. Like maybe
that could be too.
Like, obviously, if you've been paying attention, you know, right? But
me?
Yeah. But I mean, maybe they thought that if they put that in the description, it might put people off. And if they hadn't seen the first episode, they'd think, oh, well, I haven't seen the first episode, so I'm not going to watch this one because I'll miss stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Which you wouldn't really. I mean, they make reference to the fact that it's the same jewels, but aside from that, you don't really need to know anything about the first episode. But
yeah, and you've got a point. You got a point. So I'll give you that one.
But the DVD liner notes, it would make sense given our binge culture to have it in there because people are that would make people go, oh, we're going back to the first episode. Interesting. I'm in. What I'm curious about is why this was not the season finale. to me, that would make more sense to have come full circle. Not that I think it's necessarily season finale worthy. I have some issues with it, but in terms of like the concept of coming back to the beginning,
right,
that to me ties up a season really well, as opposed to just and nothing wrong with Elementary Steel. That is the last one, I think. Yeah. I love that episode. It's a good one, but I just think this was a missed opportunity of sorts.
Yeah, I think that they would have had to have done a little bit of work on the script. And when I say a little bit of work, I mean a lot.
That statement, yes, I agree as well. Like,
but yes, you're right. I mean, it would have been a nice bookend in that sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, the episode begins. We get some introductory shots of limousines, and then, an introductory shot of the limo, the Steele limo, and then we see swanky cars pulling up to the front of a large hotel, and people in swanky clothes getting out. And then next, we are in a large banquet hall full of people sitting at tables, dining, drinking. And at the far end, beneath a banner which reads, "The Society for American Heroes honors Remington Steele." Never mind the fact that he's not American. Okay, but we'll just set that aside.
Or really even a hero. I mean, I'm sorry. But like, to be fair, I'm not sure fraud counts as hero, but...
Well, I suppose it depends on the crowd you're running with.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, so underneath that banner is a table with numerous people seated, and amongst those are Laura and Remington. And immediately behind the table are several police officers and a near life-size stand-up photo of Remington. We hear Laura say, "Looks like you're about to go up, Mr. Steele. Have your remarks ready?" And Steele cockily responds that he does indeed. "I thought I might talk about how I handled the Andreas affair. You know, a cuckolded husband, a mysterious woman in a wetsuit, death by cattle prod." Now that sounds like a fan fiction somebody needs to write. I'm sorry.
I need this up. Like, yeah, someone had death by cattle prod. Like,
woman in a wetsuit.
They keep referencing all these crazy things that they're just sort of throwing together and never actually making them into episodes. And it's starting to tick me off because like we had that with well, that's not true. I guess we do get the reference to the Monte Carlo thing, but it's not quite what we expect when we get to Women of Steel. It's very different from, but still, like, come on, death by cattle prod.
Yeah, I mean, if that doesn't say fan fiction somewhere, I don't know what does. Anyway, as Steele is saying this, Laura is in the middle of taking a drink of champagne, and of course, as soon as he says it, she chokes on the drink, and she challenges him, saying, "The Andreas affair? You actually intend to go up there and take credit for the fact that I had to climb 15 stories up an elevator shaft to find the murder weapon while you were out dining on a yacht at a party thrown in your honor?"
An elevator, like Die Hard? Are we now in an like?
Well, and didn't she express a fear of heights and steel in circulation?
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't crazy about them, so yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, Steele dismissively tells her that she wouldn't be saying that if she had been on the yacht, complaining that it was some of the worst veal marsala he'd ever endured. And Laura is, of course, stunned to imagine that he could possibly imagine that he had it worse than her.
Yeah, although to be fair, this all tracks right now. Like none of this is reading dream sequence to me just yet.
Yes.
Aside from the fact that he's being honored as an American hero.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's his dream. He can dream what he wants.
It's hers.
No, it's her dream. Yeah,
it's hers.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Well, that does raise an interesting question, but anyway.
This whole dream sequence raises lots of interesting questions, which I will get to once you're done.
Anyway, the Master of Ceremonies introduces Steele as their newest American hero, and at the podium, Steele steps up to the mic, but he sidesteps the contentious Andreas affair, telling the gathered there that rather than bore them with his tired anecdotes, he thought he might field a question or two.
I like how you just said anecdotes, because that actually perfectly describes anything he does. I'm just saying, like, it was a slip of the tongue, but like it works.
And yes, because it's anecdotes. But
Yes.
I
But you said anecdotes, but his antics and
That's true.
I just
That's true. Anyway, sorry. It's been a long night. What can I say?
It's a perfect Freudian slip though for him.
Well, that's true. That's true. Anyway, a woman near the front starts things off. She recalls that in one of his early cases, he was hired to protect the rarest gems in the world. And Steele, yes, the South African royal labulite. Stones so blue, it is said that they were once pieces of the sky. And the woman continues, whatever happened to that assistant of yours, the one who nearly bungled the job? Miss Bolt, wasn't it? Nora Bolt? I trust you encouraged her to find another line of work. And of course, we see that Laura is staring intently at the woman, obviously not happy with the question.
Coming out of her ears.
And Steele's response conveys an awkward embarrassment and a sort of a, what else could I do sense of surrender. As he tells the woman,
shucks.
alas, she still works for me, madam, because there, but for the grace of God, go I. Well, Laura's heard enough. She shoots to her feet, angrily throwing down her napkin and shouts, that's it. I've heard more than enough. And she strides to the podium and she shoves Steele out of the way and begins her tirade. This man, this so-called Remington Steele. And of course, Steele reaches out around Laura trying to grab the microphone, but she slaps his hand away. He's a paper hero. And she steps over to the stand-up of Steele, punches it in the face.
Which comes out in a perfect circle.
Absolutely. Yes, because it always does, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's just like when you punch a wall in a TV show, the piece of the wall comes out and it's got these perfect edges to it.
Actually, I have a theory as to why it came out of a perfect circle. Perhaps it was designed to do that already so that after the dinner, people could like stick their heads in it like you do in
That's true.
Like, and take pictures. Like, I'm Remington. We're all Remington Steele. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, either that or they just use the same one over and over again, just replace the face depending on who they're honoring.
Who's a new American hero? Exactly. Funny how they're all dudes.
Yes. Oh, what American hero? What was his name?
The greatest American hero?
Yeah. Yeah. Greatest American hero. Yes.
Believe it or not. Sorry.
I liked that show. It didn't last very long, but it was fun.
No, it was
anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. She punches him in the face. As you said, the face pops out completely and clearly. And then she steps back to the mic, her voice rising. She declares the man's a fraud, a common thief, a scoundrel. He stepped into our lives 2 years ago with the sole intent of stealing the royal light that I had been hired to protect. She snaps her finger and dismissively directs the police officers there to cuff him. And of course, the police oblige. Yeah. I mean, it's her dream. Whatever she wants, she gets, right?
Yeah.
Of course, we don't really know it's a dream yet, but we're starting to suspect something is not quite up to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the woman who had asked the first question asks a second question. Well, if he's not Remington Steele, where is the real Remington Steele? And Laura again steps over to the stand-up, flips it around, revealing a nearly life-size image of herself, and declares, "You're looking at her. Remington Steele was the name I invented to make the public think they'd hired a big, strong man to handle their cases." And then with the final shake of the head, she orders the officers to take him away. And of course, the crowd begins applauding as the officers haul Steele away down the center aisle to the back of the room. The scene freezes on Laura, head up, looking haughty. And then we see a series of newspaper headlines appear. Laura Holt disarms terrorist bomb. Holt foils assassination plot. Holt recovers the Mona Lisa.
Holt invents breakfast cereal. I don't know. I just figured that was next.
Sliced bread.
Yeah.
Well, then the scene fades to Laura, who is fashionably dressed in a white jacket and skirt, large white hat, and oversized dark sunglasses outside of a fancy building, surrounded by an admiring throng begging for her autographs and taking photos. She finally begs off, walking away laughing, and then we see her walking around the corner into a somewhat seedy neighborhood.
Yeah.
We see a disheveled man sitting on a cardboard box on the curb. He's smoking and holding a bag, which is obviously containing a bottle. The suit he's wearing has been abused, quite abused. It's wrinkled as if it slept in over an extended period of time. It's dirty, it's grimy. as if it hasn't been cleaned or even removed from his body for a similar period of time. The man is clearly down and out, and the man is clearly Remington Steele. Seeing Laura, he gets up quickly and approaches her, asks for a quarter, for old time's sake. She chokes, presumably on the odor, and presumably he hasn't bathed for a similar time period to the clothes that haven't been cleaned. She reaches into the left pocket of her jacket, where she just conveniently happens to have a quarter.
Well, she never carries cash. It's too bulky.
Yes. She crosses her right arm across her chest, rests the elbow of her left arm on her other arm, hand with the quarter held high, which is kind of an odd stance. I mean, it's really kind of a weird stance. But then she flips the quarter so that it lands on the storm drain grate, the great storm gate grate at the edge of the street. And she begins laughing, and it's a malicious laugh as Steele gets down on his hands and knees and tries to get down in through the grates to get to the quarter. And then, channeling her inner Sam from Birmingham, she swats his rear end and then begins to walk away, laughing at his humiliation as she goes.
Yeah, so I guess we're now going to become amateur psychologists and dissect. Here's my issue that I have with dream episodes, any sorts of dream episodes with the...
Who shot JR?
Oh, God. No, well, Roseanne, hello.
I never saw that show.
It's not a dream, but it's revealed after the end of the last season that the whole season was a novel that Roseanne was writing, and anyway, it was not well received. But the issue that I have with
usually aren't
most dream sequences in episodes is that they're either too weird as to not be like, people that write these dream sequences often don't know how to write realistic dream sequences because dreams are not linear usually, and they typically kind of like either overcompensate for that or write something that nobody would actually dream because it's too story-like and linear. So it's very difficult to do a believable dream, in my opinion. It either comes across as being too much like something that would never, like, that's clearly been scripted, or it's just too wonky and weird and Twin Peaks-ish. There's no in between.
I'm going to say that, for me, I don't dream very often, and when I do, it's usually a bad thing because, for one thing, it disturbs my sleep. It wakes me up, and I have trouble getting back to sleep afterwards. But usually, my dreams fall into one of two categories, and one of those categories is somewhat linear but nonsensical, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
and that's the hard balance to strike, is that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but so, there's this progression of things that happens, but it's like nonsensical, like people I don't know that I supposedly know in the dream.
Yep, I do that.
Places that I don't recognize, but in my dream they are, it's like my house, or it's this place or that place. And it's like, I've never seen this place before, in my mind once I'm conscious. But, occasionally, maybe more than occasionally. I don't know. Maybe this is something I shouldn't admit.
Now you have to. Now that you've said that.
I have these dreams that when I wake up, I don't remember them as dreams. I remember them as real events.
Oh, yeah, that happens. That used to happen to me. Have you ever dreamed you've been mad at somebody and then woken up mad at them?
Well, that too, yes.
Like,
yes.
I wouldn't talk to, there was one, I wouldn't talk to my best friend. I got on, this was when I was in school, we got on the bus and I was like, totally like, I'm not talking to you. And she was like, why? And I'm like, I can't remember what the dream was, but I was furious about it.
Yeah. And I've had those dreams where I am mad at somebody and I wake up mad at the person.
You're mad at them.
Yeah. But no, the one that I remember most distinctly, I was very early 20s, maybe. I was working at a place called Jafco, which was a catalog showroom. You'd go in, you'd find the item you like, you'd fill out a card, you'd take it to the back, and they'd pull it out of the warehouse for you. And there's a story about the company name too, but I won't get into that because it's a family-friendly podcast.
Okay.
Just another company and fill in the F.
Yep.
But I was dreaming that one of the people I was working with had gotten fired. And after the fact, I realized it was a dream. But I had dreamed, okay, they had gotten fired. I was there when it happened.
Oh.
And then the next time I go into work, the person's there. It's like, what are you doing here? You were fired, weren't you? I mean,
oh, it must have been a really vivid dream.
I mean, but I have those kinds of dreams, and it's I'm sure that there's some sort of weird psychological thing that says, okay, you're definitely you've got problems, and we need to lock you up before you get weird. but
yeah. I think the point here is that, with the exception of like the odd dream, most of the time our dreams are not this logical, even if we can even call us that, right? And like, I know you're going to roll your eyes at me, but the only episode that I've ever seen that's done a convincing dream sequence, the fourth season finale.
How did I know the Buffy reference?
Well, but it was kind of weird because they had never done like the entire episode was dream sequences, and it was broken down into 4 parts. And so each person's dream would overlap over each other's, with the one constant being the villain try to kill them all in their dreams. And a guy with some cheese, that every part of it, literally he appeared in all of their dreams, and every other parts of their dream, like you could do university courses dissecting what it meant to their character, with the exception of the cheese guy, who apparently had no particular meaning whatsoever. He was just a red herring. But anyway, like, it was probably one of the few shows where I was riveted by it because it felt like a real dream. Like they really seem to capture the surrealness, but also like it's somewhat linear, but it's not quite linear. You walk through a room, you're in another building, like that feeling, right? This, and I'm going to have issues with a lot of the dreams in this, because if this is supposed to imply that these are, I'm not sure what this is supposed to imply. I guess that's my issue with it, because if this is a fantasy, it's a particularly cruel one for her, and then later on for him. Right? Like, are we supposed to believe that Laura deep down wants to see him cuffed, taken away, and then destitute on the street, and then begging for money? Are we supposed to believe that secretly she wants to deny him even that, and like walk away laughing maniacally at his bad fortune? Like, I was with her up until, like, I could see her fantasizing about getting up in front of everybody and announcing that she's the real hero and he's not. I could see that being something she might dream about. But then getting him to be taken away by the police, and the rest of it feels vicious. Like,
yes,
it just feels vicious.
Yeah, and I had the same kind of response like you to many of the dreams in this episode. You know, what we were talking about before, where you wake up angry at somebody from something in a dream, those are usually based on some either real event or some discussion or an
insecurity.
I mean, there's something that you can point it to, and it's not the same as these. Yeah, these are, as you said, it's like, wow, do you really think that about Laura, or do you really think that about
subtle.
Remington?
Like, if we're trying to make a subtle statement here, we as the viewers at this point, we know that she wants recognition for her efforts. We know that she feels she's not getting it. And we know that deep down inside, she wants to at least once be seen as the person responsible for the great deeds of Remington Steele. Like, this is nothing, we're not adding anything new to Laura that we don't already know.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, we're suggesting that she wants to see him destroyed so that she can be lifted up, which I don't think she does and never would think that she does. So it's very bizarre that that's supposedly presented as the fantasy. It's not even like it's a nightmare. This is a fantasy.
Yeah. It's yeah.
If it were his nightmare, that would make sense to me. If this if we were to switch these dreams, and I think the same is true with hers, if we were to switch, with his later on, if we were to switch these and have it be his dream, I could see this as
Mhm.
being something that he secretly fears, that one day she'll get fed up with being the number 2, that she will
Yep.
turn him in for who he is and then walk off into the sunset and leave him without anything because he's relying on her. He said it a couple of times. He said it in threads. He said it in a few episodes where, thank God you did this or we'd both be scrounging for the rent. I think
Right.
it would be a hell of a lot more interesting if this was his dream, because it would reveal that
His
although he's
insecurities.
perfectly fine he's completely able to take care of himself. He's done it before. He would do it again. But now he's dependent on her, or at least emotionally dependent in a way that he's never been. So this would track for me if it was his.
It would also, I think, reveal his emotional his
Yes.
insecurity about the relationship and his emotional insecurity about it. So,
and his own contribution, because he might still feel like he's not an equal partner, that she's still pulling all of the weight, that he's just dining on yachts where she's doing all the work. Like, I don't know that. Like, I didn't even think of this until we were having this conversation just now. But I would love this episode so much more if they reversed this dream and the next one was the other way around too, because that would, to me,
that's brilliant.
That would reveal something about it. Totally not in the notes, folks. Just came up with it.
That's right. But it's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. So, yeah, no, I agree with you totally. But anyway, let's get back into the episode.
Sorry. I think we're going to spend the bulk of these episodes looking at these dream sequences because let's face it, the actual plot, as entertaining as it is they had to kind of pare it down in order to make room for the dream sequences.
Yeah. So. And, maybe the dream sequences are actually a little bit of padding because the script is, the plot is so thin. Anyway, of course, if we haven't figured it out by now, we have it revealed to us that it's a dream. We see Laura sleeping on the couch in Steele's apartment as he's working on the internals of a briefcase. She wakes up and asks how long she's been out. Steele says, about an hour. And what was so funny that had you laughing in your sleep?
She's laying on the couch. This is progress. Sorry, I just wanted to point this out. If we're going back to Couch Watch, it's being used as a couch.
Well, as a bed, but yeah, I mean, it's better than the floor. Okay.
She's not laying on the floor. So.
That's right. Well, rather than admit the true contents of her dream, she says that she was dreaming about the case, which is marginally true.
Ish,
yes. She asks if he doesn't find it funny that she's put him in charge of protecting the very jewels that he was originally trying to steal 2 years earlier. And he gives a less than amused response. Laura asks if this is going to be sufficient, referring to the briefcase and whatever he's done to it. And Steele assures her that the briefcase is absolutely impregnable, bulletproof, acid-proof, flame-proof. The only way to get in is to use the 2 latches, each of which has been set to a combination known only to Steele.
Okay, so here's my question, and it's probably the same one you have. Why? Why would she not know the combination? Of all people, control freak Laura Holt.
Well, here's let me go through my notes because I get to that point. She asks, well, what if something were to happen? And that's the point that she's referring to, I think. But he doesn't take it that way. He says, well, anyone attempting to open the case without the correct combination will find himself the recipient of a particularly nasty particularly nasty burst of DC current, about 1,000 volts to be precise. But I think that was what she was referring to.
Yeah, because if he dies, I guess they just stay there forever?
Exactly.
How does that
work?
Here
in my notes. After all, what happens if something were to happen to Mr. Steele? If he is the only one able to get in the briefcase, at least unless one enjoys receiving severe electrical burns, how would Laura get into the briefcase to get the Royal Labulite? We're thinking the same way here.
Yeah, that's scary.
I know. Well, you'll get over it. But I think that was really the question she was asking, but he didn't answer that. And that's, I wonder why.
Well, but I mean then it seems odd that she would, it seems odd that she would defer, and she says it later on. So maybe this will come up to that when they're in the coffin, but like, it seems odd that she would give him
Stop
entire
jumping ahead.
control over this entire operation without even questioning what he's doing. Like,
Yeah.
that seems, not that she doesn't trust him, but that if they're doing something that's so important, they should both know what it is.
Well, and it's also a little bit out of character for Laura.
Very, very out of character for her.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Laura.
We'll get there when we get to the coffin. But yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes. Laura, with perhaps a touch of sarcasm, calls it charming, 1,000 volts, saying that she knew she could count on him. And Steele lightly says that trust is all he's ever wanted. Well, trust and a new suit now and again. And of course, Laura gives an eye roll. And in the interest of Steele's newfound interest and trust, she says, well, then tell me, who are you really? And Steele frowns and asks her if that really matters. And Laura counters that it only matters that he won't tell her. And then she
This
bids
is
him
interesting.
farewell.
Did you, because I reread the script shortly before we came on, and Laura's interpretation of that line, or I should say Stephanie's interpretation of that line, is different from what's in the script. The script just says that they smile at each other. And she does smile, but it's more of a sardonic, like there's an anger to it, especially when she says it only matters that you won't tell me. Whereas it looks in the script, or at least how I saw it in the script, it looks to be more affectionate. It doesn't come across that way here. It comes across as her being irritated with him.
Yes.
And yeah, that it sort of tracks talking about waking up angry. Although I don't know what she'd have to be angry about, given that her dream was all a fantasy of destroying him. But like, it definitely feels like she's poking at a wound when she says that before she leaves, and he's weary with it because he says what his line is, does that really matter now? To him, it shouldn't matter. And of course it does matter, because if you're with somebody, you should at least know their name, or if they don't know it, you should know that part. Right? So both of them have points. She has a point in that it does matter that he won't tell her. After 2 years of the two of them being together, he still doesn't trust her enough to at least tell her what his background is. And he's bothered by the fact that she's continuing to ask, as if his presence there wasn't enough. So
yeah, it's just a different, they each have a different interpretation of where their relationship is. And she's saying, well, you don't trust me enough to tell me your background. And he's thinking, well, you don't trust me enough to not really think that it matters.
Yeah. Or to take my actions up until this point at face value.
Yeah. I told you once I loved you, and if it changes, I'll let you know. Anyway, next we see a lawn outside of a luxurious and sprawling mansion. It's the Dexter Holmes mansion. There's a crowd along with Laura and Remington. There is a pair of police officers. We've seen them before. And a blonde woman, Clarissa Custer, who is standing next to a safe, which is on top of a draped pedestal, let's say.
She got a break from Who's the Boss here.
Yes. Anyway, as Clarissa removes a small metal box from the safe and opens it for everyone to see the contents, Holmes announces, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, my fabulous stones of royal labulite." Has the ownership?
Guess South Africa never got them back.
that was my notes right there. Yes. More frightening similarities of thought. Yes, you will be destroyed by the time I am done with you. Looking over the stones, Laura comments that she had forgotten how beautiful they were, and with a frown on his face, Steele responds that he hadn't. A reporter asks Clarissa if Constellation Insurance is satisfied with Mr. Steele's security arrangements for the gems, and Steele steps forward toward Clarissa, who is telling the reporter that, well, if the company wasn't satisfied, would they be insuring them to the tune of $3.6 million? Steele picks up one of the stones and begins scrutinizing it through a jeweler's loop. And with a satisfied tone, he comments, like pieces of the sky. He returns the stone to the box, and Clarissa places a padlock on it. So is he only going to examine one? It seems rather slipshod.
Yeah, not only that, but when they ask her if they're satisfied with Remington Steele's security arrangements, they don't know them.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, but see, that's PR for you. So you don't tell people that you don't know something. It's all illusion. It's all illusion. So, yeah. Anyway, as Steele and Clarissa place a security seal on the box is then placed in Steele's special briefcase, and Holmes announces that he hopes to see everyone that evening at his El Diego Hotel in Los Angeles, where the stones will go on permanent display. Clarissa asks Steele how he's going to transport the stones. Steele begins to answer, but Laura cuts him off, stating that, well, they've made reservations on every plane, train, bus, and boat leaving town for the next 3 hours. You know, that should be a movie title.
Yeah. It's also a lot of, I'm wondering if they paid for every plane, train, bus, and whatever it's going to cost them a pretty penny.
Usually they do like some money up front for those things, don't they?
And they said it was, 100 miles?
Yeah, it's a little over 100 miles.
Would there even be a plane aside from private planes that you can take that far?
I looked because I had that same question, and it does look like there are commuter flights from the Bay Area down to.
Okay, but
not the Bay Area, but yeah,
the Proclaimers walk further than that. I'm just saying, they walked 500 miles, and then they walked 500 more. Just to be the man that walked 1,000. No, it's a song. Anyway, some people will get it.
But no, there are apparently commuter flights that go from there to.
I feel like it would take longer to get through all of the airport stuff and get on the plane and get into the plane and get off the runway. Like that feels to me like it would take longer than the actual flight. But I guess whatever floats your plane.
You know, they used to have planes that were
seaplanes,
boats, seaplanes, yes. Anyway, next we jump to Laura and Remington as they are getting into the Rabbit. Laura asks Steele exactly how are they getting back to L.A. Airplane? And Laura is aghast when Steele reveals his brilliant plan.
I don't know why. Hers was fairly simple, too, with the laundry bait and switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they're going to drive, or as Laura puts it, they're going to be sitting ducks on the open road for 100 miles. Steele excuses this by saying it's so much closer to the ground. Has he developed an aversion to flying? I mean, because that's the kind of thing that somebody like myself.
I think you're projecting.
So I am not projecting. But no, somebody who has an aversion to flying, if they wanted to give a flippant response about, well, why are you driving? Why are you taking the train? Why are you taking a bus? Why are you doing that instead of taking an airplane, which is so much easier, faster? This is the kind of response they would give.
I don't know if it's that he's developed an aversion to flying, but I think that he's aware of that. What they're doing, there's probably going to be people that are going to try to steal these gems, and that he'd rather not be in an airplane when they do it. At least, I guess.
I would have thought that an airplane would be safer, but what do I know?
Well, I mean, I get, but if you if somebody hijacks it and jumps out with a parachute, and you're left holding the,
They could, I guess they could. I was going to say, what are you going to do? Hijack a commuter plane to Cuba? But yeah, no. They could, I suppose, jump out.
Yeah. So, I don't know. To me, it seems. I don't know if he's afraid of. I doubt it because they fly later on. He flies to. Spoiler alert! At the end of season 3, he takes a flight to Ireland and Mexico. They do a lot of flying on this show. So
well, that's true, but there's ways of dealing with flight anxiety that would allow a person to be kind of marginally able. Yeah, unconscious would be one way, or highly inebriated to where you get to the point where you don't care anymore. But yeah. Anyway, So anyway, next we see that Steele is driving the rabbit and Laura's in the passenger seat asleep and the briefcase is between them. Steele has a frown on his face and he leans over and sniffs at Laura's hair, then returns his attention back to his driving, although he's still obviously bothered by some errant odor. Laura begins to wake up and she comments that she must have dozed off, and Steele observes that seems to be becoming a habit. Steele again leans over, sniffs at her, and asks if she's wearing a new perfume. No, I thought that was you. Why does that make me think? The one who dealt it, or the one who smelt it, dealt it.
Dealt it, yeah.
I'm sorry. Bathroom humor, sorry. Laura realizes that the odor is coming from the briefcase and comments that it's kind of nice, kind of musky.
She certainly doesn't think that way when she finds the bottle. And wouldn't either of them find it odd that there's a smell that wasn't there before?
Briefcases aren't supposed to smell musky. They're supposed to only smell like leather, at most maybe spilled coffee in a sandwich. So yeah, that was my thought too. This didn't ring any bells with anybody's heads?
Oh, apparently not.
Apparently not. Anyway, Laura glances at the side mirror. There's some cars behind them, and they catch her attention, and she asks Steele if they've been back there behind them the entire time. Steele seems to have been caught off guard by her question.
Well, sure, he's too busy smelling her hair.
Well, and it seems like he hasn't really been paying attention to what's been going on behind them. But not to worry,
That's a nice
he tells
change
her.
Of pace.
Not to worry, he tells. Not to worry, he tells her. And then he leaves the main road for an access strip leading to a construction area. And this construction area features an elevated plateau where various pieces of heavy construction equipment are parked. Laura congratulates Steele on the maneuver. Then Steele reaches into the back seat, pulls out a large picnic basket and an insulated cooler, and he's brought lunch. Laura is pleased and famished. Steele proudly says that the simple plans are always the best. And if anyone follows them up here, they'll know it's a tail. Obviously, he's had this place scoped out.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He's run this route, so he knows what he's doing. He just wasn't paying attention to what was going on behind him. But in any case, he's come fully prepared. This is what he tells her. And then he pulls back the jacket to reveal the agency gun tucked into his waistband of his pants.
He's got the gun a lot in this season.
Yeah, and it doesn't appear to be in a holster, which is not good, not safe. But at least it's not tucked down the front of his pants.
Yeah.
That's an improvement. Anyway, Steele pulls out a bottle of wine from the cooler, begins to open it, and Laura has pulled out some glasses from the picnic basket, and then Steele begins to pour the wine into the glasses, and he continues to outline his plan. It won't do any good for anyone to wait up ahead, knowing that they're driving the rabbit, because after lunch, they're going to the car rental agency just across the way to swap cars, picking up an unassuming domestic sedan he reserved in the name of Benjamin Pearson. And Laura gives a mildly amused at the reference. And as they're sampling their drinks, Laura spots a car that seems to be headed their way. They step over to observe, but as they do, there's the sound of an engine starting. They look and see a bulldozer is headed toward the rabbit. They rush over to the car, Laura to the front, Steele to the passenger's door. He reaches in, tries to grab the briefcase, but it seems like he can't quite reach it. Plus, the dozer is bearing down on them, so he hops onto the hood of the car, bonnet for our friends across the way, and makes one more grab for the briefcase, but it's too late. So he jumps off the car down the side of the embankment, and Laura follows suit from the front of the car, with both of them rolling nearly to the bottom. Well, the bulldozer plows into the car, setting it off the embankment and down to the sidewalk.
That poor car. This is, okay, so run off the road in Moulton, into the pond in small town. So, like 2 episodes in a row here, this poor car has needed some form of repair or another. We're going to have to start, like, you know how we're on concussion watch for Steele? We're going to have to start, like, repair watch for this rabbit, because it's like every other week, this car is the one, it gets stolen, it gets, it never seems to happen to the Auburn.
No. Of course, they don't rely so heavily on the Auburn as they do the rabbit. But if you watch carefully, you can catch a continuity error immediately after the break in the episode where commercials would be, where the rabbit goes from being in perfect condition on the passenger side to being damaged before the dozer hits it. So it looks like this was probably not their first take, or they had to swap out Stephanie's real car for a junker so they could shove it down the hill.
She's looking at the script and she's like, guys, seriously? Again?
You blew up my house and now you want to wreck my car too?
What is wrong with you people?
Anyway, Laura and Remington began to run back up the hill, but Steele can't run. His ankle is damaged and his head is bleeding. They managed to get to the top in time to see the dozer driving away. Although I would have thought that Laura could have probably run fast enough to catch up to the dozer.
Yeah, probably.
And get a look at the driver, given that the maximum speed of a Caterpillar 963 is 6.3 miles an hour, 10 kilometers. I looked that up. Yes. Yeah, she could have outrun that. And even if she couldn't have done anything, maybe she could at least have ID'd the driver.
Yeah.
Just saying, Laura. Just saying. Instead, they watch it drive off.
She was just knocked off a cliff, though. So maybe they're both a little bit dazed. Like, we'll give her a break here.
Okay. All right. Fine. Anyway, they watch it drive off, and then they start to make their way back down to the hill to the rabbit. And as they do, they note a helicopter flying overhead. It has pontoons where landing skis would normally be attached, indicating that it is intended to land on water environments as well as land. Back down at the rabbit, Laura looks inside the car, which is upside down, looking for the briefcase, but it's not there. It must have been thrown from the car. Laura starts looking around for any signs of the briefcase, while Steele, still sitting there nursing his injury, and presuming the perpetrator had somehow managed to take the briefcase, can't understand how that would have been possible. It wasn't out of their sight long enough for somebody to be waiting to run away with it. And besides, they would have seen whoever it was. After a few moments, Laura spots it, grabs it, and delivers it to Steele. He fumbles to remember the combinations, finally remembering and getting the case open. The metal box inside is seemingly untouched. He pulls out the box, checks the lock and the seal. All is well. Frustrated and upset, and perhaps somewhat confused, Laura wanders back to her beloved rabbit, only to spot a tracking device attached to the bottom of the car, which is now in plain view since, as I said, the car is upside down.
Upside down.
Yeah. That's a repair bill.
Yep.
Anyway.
And they keep taking it back to the same mechanic, and the mechanic's going to be like, all right, seriously, what did you do this week? What did you do? What did you do?
It reminds me of the Home Improvement episode where Tim drops a beam on the Nomad.
Oh, yeah.
And it's in the shop, and she's looking for one of her class books because she's going to school, and she remembers that it's in the Nomad, so she goes to the shop, and she's talking to the mechanic. She has no idea what's happened. And the mechanic is telling her that, we'll be putting in a lot of extra overtime on your car. It's going to be, a good year. And her comment is, well, I've done way more damage than that. And he says, he grabs a business card and hands it to her and says, call us anytime.
Speaking of fan fictions,
mm-hmm.
I would like to see one from the point of view of Laura's mechanic. Just like a day in the life where like they ride up in the car, it's in pieces, and he's like, how? And she's like, don't even ask, just send me the bill.
Okay, writers, you've been given the challenge. It's been issued.
Yeah.
Do your worst. Do your best. Whatever. Anyway, Steele gets up, he hobbles to the car, picks up a sandwich container from the ground. And looking over the car, Laura tells Steele that she's not sure which of them is in worse shape. Steele pronounces himself to be in the worst shape because, in part, he doesn't understand why anyone would go to all the trouble to ambush them and then not take the jewels. Laura suggests that, well, they goofed. They didn't mean to knock the rabbit down the hill. Steele suggests that they depart before their adversaries return and then takes a bite of sandwich. As Laura picks up an umbrella. What?
Yeah.
An umbrella?
In LA.
Bright sunshine.
That's a business that's probably not going to make a lot of money, right? Like if you are planning on opening an umbrella store, I don't think there's such a thing as stores that sell just umbrellas, but if there were, you wouldn't want to do that in LA. You'd want to open it in like Vancouver.
It never rains in Southern California. Oh, anyway. Anyway, where was I? Yes, Laura picks up an umbrella, suggesting that it might come in handy as, a make Duquesne. Steele comments that violence and destruction gives him a hunger.
He's hangry.
He's angry, yes. Next, we see Laura and Remington finally showing up at the hotel in their nondescript sedan. A table is next to a lagoon that's been prepared for the revealing of the successfully transported stones. Holmes, Clarissa, and an older man are waiting. And Steele and Laura walk and hobble to the table. Holmes greets them pretty sarcastically, but Clarissa, seeing their condition, asks if they're all right. Laura explains that their condition and excuses their tardiness by saying they had a flat tire and rolled into a ditch. I guess that's probably somewhat true.
Yeah.
Anyway, Clarissa directs Steele to give the stones to the older gentleman, who is Archie Doak by name, Constellation's jewel appraiser. He's there to authenticate the royal labulite. Just a formality, you understand. Steele hands the box to Doak, who examines the lock and the seal and states that the seal is intact. Doak and Clarissa remove the seal and then the lock, and Doak pulls out the stones to examine. Doak chuckles a congratulations to Steele, who cockily grins. Doak continues, declaring the stones to be some of the best fakes he's ever seen.
He says it in a really creepy way, though.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just the actor's delivery, but, congratulations, Mr. Steele. These are the finest fakes I've ever seen. Okay, James Bond villain.
Anyway, as he's saying that, Laura gets a serious look on her face. Steele either isn't paying attention or he thinks Doak is being amusing.
Yeah.
Until Doak says he'd like to see the real stones and your joke has gone far enough. And, of course, Steele's face slowly changes from jovial to uncertain and then offended. He insists that those are the real stones. I checked them myself. Doak pulls out his "I'm an expert, how dare you question me" card, saying that he's been in the business for over 42 years and knows the difference between royal labulite and pieces of colored glass.
Which begs the question, if they're the best fakes he's ever seen, I doubt that they would be colored glass. I would assume
it's a euphemism.
That they would use. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not literally colored glass, but that's probably the common vernacular for that sort of thing.
Fair enough.
Anyway, Holmes demands to know what Steele's trying to pull. Steele demands to know what Doak is trying to pull. Those are the real stones, and he'll stake his reputation on it. Doak declares the stones garbage and that Steele is a crook. Steele demands to see the stones. Doak refuses. Steele tries to take them from him. Doak resists. And in the midst of the struggle, the stones are thrown into the lagoon next to them.
Yep.
Laura dives in, disturbing a group of swans, and Doak crawls down into the water. Both dive under the surface once or twice, presumably looking for the stones. But after their attempts fail, they cease. And desperately, Steele assures Laura that Doak is lying. Clarissa says that there's only one sure way to get to the bottom of it. Next, it's night.
I would say this, that Laura, at least for all of the issues that I have with dream sequences of this episode, there's no point where Laura questions Steele. There's no point in this episode where she doesn't trust that he's telling the truth or that something has gone wrong with their, she doesn't think that it's a scam on his end.
I think there's a point where she does have some wavering trust. And we'll get to that. To that. I think there's a point.
I don't see that, but you point out when we get to it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, it's night. There's a crowd of people standing around the edge of the lagoon. There's Laura, Steele, Clarissa, Doak. There's police officers, there's divers and more. There are police cars, there's a tanker truck, there's diving equipment. The search is on. Clarissa apologizes, saying that she thought it would be a simple job with a good fee and good PR for the agency. And she concludes by saying that hopefully it's all just some sort of mistake. Steele indignantly says, "No mistake. Doak is doing this intentionally." And Clarissa says, "Well, why would he do that? What would he hope to gain? He's been with the company for 40 years. He's loyal. He's a recognized expert in gemology. And Laura, slightly offended, comes to Steele's defense, as well, of course, the defense of the agency, albeit in an indirect manner. And she indignantly points out that Mr. Steele is also a recognized expert.
Well, I mean, you spend enough time stealing them and you're going to do both.
Well, okay. There are certain details you just don't need to reveal.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, don't tell them what they don't need to know. Anyway, Clarissa says, well, isn't there some way the stones could have been switched in transit? Were they ever out of their sight? And Steele and Laura answer in unison, no, never. Steele assures Clarissa that those are the real stones, guaranteed. And about that time, one of the divers comes up out of the lagoon, cupping his hands, and he's got the stones. He hands them to Doak, who then hands them out to Clarissa. No, he doesn't need to examine them. Well, Steele insists on examining them. And taking Doak's jeweler's loop, he declares that it's time to prove Doak a charlatan. He begins eagerly examining one of the stones while reciting, Royal Avulite, so blue, they're like pieces of the... Then he slowly lowers the stone in the jeweler's loop from front of his face, and he turns to Laura, looking as if he's just swallowed something very unpleasant, and says, Laura, these are fakes.
Possibly, I mean, it's a little dark, I would think, to do a thorough examination on them, but yeah.
Well, if they're really good fakes, yeah, you would think so. I mean, and Doak did declare them to be very good fakes, some of the best he's ever seen.
Yeah.
I could see where if they were really bad fakes, you might be able to tell even in that scenario. But yeah, that was a question I had too. Isn't it a little dark to be doing that sort of a...
I mean, I'm not a gemologist, but I would think you'd need
But I play one on TV.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then we cut to a dream sequence. Steele, in what we soon find out is a fancy parlor in a casino, is decked out in white, the same way Laura was decked out in white in her earlier dream. We see the stones in Steele's hands and hear a man with a French accent saying, so, Remington, they are finally yours. No, that's not French.
That's definitely not French, no.
No. To which Steele replies, and now they're yours, Jacques. Price is agreed upon, and then Jacques wonders about the delay. All that time you were in America. I've never known you to take so long to achieve your objective. And Steele has a sad smile on his face. There was a woman. I was prepared to forget about the jewels if I could have had her instead. But a man can only wait so long. Jacques tries to console him, saying, better the jewels. They're always there when you want them. The jewels, they will never break your heart. Two men shake hands, and Jacques leaves Steele sitting alone at the table. Next, we see Steele in the casino. He's standing behind a glamorously dressed blonde, draped in rhinestones, playing what I think is Baccarat, but
it's chemin de fer.
That was the other thing. See, I don't know either game, but from what I see here and from what I see of photos of
it's Baccarat.
tables,
it's basically like a version of it from what I could Google.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But yeah, because the chemin de fer and blonde from Nice comes up later in the episode, so that's why I put that in there as an alternative possibility.
Yeah.
Anyway, Laura comes in. She's dressed in a black and red lion striped dress. Or tiger striped dress, actually. Also wearing rhinestones, though not nearly as many as the blonde, and a red beret. She pulls a cigarette from a case, walks up to Steele, drapes herself on him, and asks for a light.
Yeah, wait till we see where that hand goes later.
Okay. Obviously, I missed something.
Oh, yeah. If you rewatch when she slides down his pant leg, her hand...
Really?
Oh yeah. Like she gives if he accidentally if Brosnan accidentally gropes Stephanie in another episode, and he does like he grabs her at one point, picks her up or something and accidentally grabs her boob. This is a long-standing joke that she like gets a full
handle
on the package, so to speak.
Anyway,
not that I was looking.
Yeah, no, not that would be of any interest to anybody. Anyway, she strokes his hair and then dramatically tells him that she's searched for the world for him. Venice, Cairo, Mozambique. But she was always a step behind. And Steele dismissively says that some things never change. Laura has overly dramatic fake sobs here, and then she drops to her knees. I guess this is where she
Yeah.
gets a handful. And she's crying, please, Mr. Steele, your leaving forced me to reevaluate my life. I realized that perhaps I was ready to make emotional commitments after all. And he looks down at her and coldly asks, and have you? Which leads to the best line of the episode.
Yeah. It's
Many times. 3 in the last hour, as a matter of fact.
It's also an interesting thing because if we're setting aside, again, the fact that this is, we'll talk about the dream as a whole in a minute, but it's interesting that the only thing that I find truthful in this dream is that he is the one equating sex with an emotional commitment, because I think that, no, I'm serious, because, and hear me out, because like, obviously she's been fearful of sleeping with him, crossing that line, etc., for her own reasons. But I think for him, part of the like he could have sex in a heartbeat if he wanted to with any anonymous blonde, and has in the past. But I think for him, the reason why he wants to be with Laura, in addition to obviously the physical side of it, is that it is an emotional commitment, and that he knows that she feels that way about it and wants her to have that, like, to commit to him in that way. But she won't. Okay. She's withholding that, right? Like, it's not just that she's withholding herself physically. He knows that that means she's also withholding herself emotionally, and always has been to an extent. So, I mean, setting aside the joke of the, 3 in the last hour, like this sort of shows us that this is probably the only part of the dream that makes sense, that he regrets not having a more deeper emotional commitment with Laura, or that she's not giving it to him.
Obviously not.
Okay. Yeah, I walked right into that. Shut up.
Anyway, after her line about the emotional commitments she's made in the last hour, she nearly breaks into a song from the movie Grease. You're the one that I want. Doop, doop, doop.
Yeah,
You're the one that I need. Anyway, as she cries, repeating, take me back, take me back, Steele pulls out the handkerchief from his jacket pocket and hands it to her, urging her to calm herself. Her rhinestones are getting damp. She takes the handkerchief, dabs her eyes, apologizes for her outburst, saying that she realizes that she's not worthy of a man like him. I got a problem with that line. She tucks the handkerchief back in his pocket, puts her hand behind his head and pulls him to her, then plants a big old kiss on him. She begins to walk away. Steele wipes the lipstick off of his face, then stops her. He reaches into his jacket pocket, where he just conveniently happens to have a quarter.
Yeah.
Pulls it out and hands it to her, telling her, for old time's sake, hey, Nora? She walks away. Steele and the blonde turn to leave, and then we see that Laura has begun making yet another emotional commitment with a sailor who leans her back and lays her onto the roulette table.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steele pauses to look back at her.
Or is it roulette that's Chemin-de-Fer? I don't know. It's one of those. It's roulette or baccarat. It's one of the games.
Chemin-de-Fer is played with cards, so it's got to be the baccarat. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So anyway, Steele looks back at Laura, who's still laying on the roulette table, but this time with the sailor a little bit more up there with her.
Yep.
She stretches her arm out. She knocks a champagne bottle off of the table onto the floor, where it shatters, and then we're inside of a car, looking out the front window as it plows into a line of metal garbage cans. Then we see that Steele, behind the steering wheel, suddenly jerks awake.
So he had that whole dream while he was driving? I mean, I thought my dad was good at driving while asleep, but that actually
it's classic.
It takes the. He used to say he did his best driving while sleeping.
Or his best sleeping while driving.
Yeah. So if we're to believe that Laura's fantasies,
but sometimes dreams can happen. A big dream can happen in just like a fraction of a second. That's real world.
That's true.
So, anyway, you were saying, sorry.
If we're to believe that like Laura's fantasy is to utterly and completely destroy him until he's destitute and then laugh in his face, are we to believe that his fantasy is to reject her when she's throwing herself at him? Because, like, okay, like to humiliate her? Is that what he wants? Like, both of these don't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and they both seem a little cruel.
They're equally as vicious. Like, this is a vicious thing. Like, it implies that he's only sticking around because he's wanting to have to sleep with her, and that if he can't, he's just going to go back to his life of crime. And that if she comes crawling back, he's not just going to tell her no, he's going to humiliate her in the worst way. Because, like, it also implies that he seems to think that without her, she's going to devolve into tacky rhinestones and cheap hookups. Like, the script describes her as a prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
What? Like,
well, the other thing I'm seeing is that the portrayal of Laura in this as the prostitute, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's almost like he in his mind, he's saying, yeah, she'll give it to everybody but me.
Yeah, which she's not. Like, she has been just as celibate as he had. In fact, I mean, Millicent, hello. Like, he's had more action than she has in that particular sense. It's not like she's been throwing herself at every dude that comes onto the scene. Like, that's not the case.
Every Tom, Dick, and Murphy.
Yeah, every Tom, Dick, and Murphy. Yeah, it's very, again, if we were to examine this from the other side of it, I'm not saying that Laura's greatest fear is that she will fall apart and become a prostitute if he leaves her.
No.
But I think she is deep down afraid that, we all know that she's afraid that she's worried that he's only sticking around for the challenge. And I don't think that she even really believes that now, but I do think she's worried that he will eventually become bored and that he will go back to his old ways. So I definitely think that that's a fear that is still there, whether it's sleeping together that triggers it or not. Like, I think she's still afraid that he's eventually going to be bored with being the straight, riding the straight and narrow, and that he will eventually want the glamorous blonde instead of her. And I think she is afraid of being emotionally vulnerable and asking, like, if she were to lose him, I think she's afraid of what she would do. Not necessarily that I think she's thinking that she would end up prostituting herself, but I think she's afraid that she might break down and she might say, please don't go. And that's scary to her. The fact that he would have any sort of emotional control.
Well, she's got all this emotional baggage from her past. Her dad leaving, Wilson leaving, and there's probably been others that we don't know about. But she's got this history, and even though
her mother's response too, she talks about her mother falling apart, right?
So even though she is getting to the point where she's got more trust and faith in him, and is getting to the point where she's thinking, okay, he is getting serious about this, that's still in the back of the mind.
Yeah.
And you don't get over that, and you don't snap your fingers and, oh, well, it's okay now.
Yeah, and I think she's afraid of how much she needs him at this point emotionally. So I could see this being a really exaggerated fear of that. This, if he's gone, what am I? Who am I without him now? Like, I've given too much power to him, which she does say later on. So again, this should be her dream, not his.
Well, the garbage cans I left on as part of the end of the dream because in a sense it was. I do have a couple of questions about the dream. One being, first of all, a little bit of a flippant question. Were Laura and the sailor going to get make their emotional commitments to each other right there on the roulette table?
On the roulette table? I get the impression the answer is yes.
Yes, really. $1 a ticket.
She's very committed, yeah.
But let's see. Here was it. Yeah, we kind of touched on this. Since we learned that this is Steele's dream, what does it mean about his thoughts about Laura? And has the Acapulco Come to Mama version of Laura inspired this imagining?
if it has, it's inspired it in all the worst ways.
Yes.
Like it's inspired this concept, like you said, that if we are reading into this as his dream, that he thinks, well, she'll do this in Acapulco and she'll do that but she won't even but that's very, that is not a good look for him. Like, again, this is not a good look for either one of them if this is genuinely their dream, because it implies that he's not valuing her as a human. He's valuing her as the thing you put kindness coins into until the sex pops out. Like, that's not how women work. So,
it's not.
No, it isn't. Unfortunately, that's and it implies that he's only valuing her for what she is withholding from him, which is not that's not the character.
Just flesh.
Yeah, just flesh, which these dreams are so frustrating. And I think that this is my issue with this episode, because I just realized that if I could headcanon the reverse of these dreams, I would love this episode. This would be one of my favorites. And I know that this is going to be an unpopular take, because I know that there are other people that love these dreams, that find them funny. And I get that they're going for zany, exaggerated interpretations of their fears, but to me, it's always come across as cruel and malicious and not funny in the slightest. So
yeah,
I'm going to headcanon it from now on, that those, at least the first two dreams, I'm not sure how the next two are going to hold up here, but we'll see. But yeah, they just, I don't know. I don't know what the writers were, I don't know what the point was the writers were trying to make with these dreams.
So anyway, as Steele is trying to gather his wits about him after having woken up from his driving dream, Laura momentarily grabs the steering wheel and asks if he's all right, and he excuses it as a mere daydream. And he gives her a perplexed look, and then a second perplexed look, obviously, waking up dream mad. When Laura asks if his dreams were about Archie Doak, he outlines the situation. They know that there was no time for the stones to be switched when they were ambushed, so somehow Doak did it right under their eyes. Well, what about the ambush? If it had succeeded, he would have secured the stones right then and there, but once it failed, it became a clever sleight of hand that makes them think that they'd lost the stones there.
Do you think that's what it was? Because this is another question I've had as to whether or not that was actually an attempt at the jewels, because I always read it as trying to trick them into thinking that this was... I never thought they were trying to get the jewels there, because...
The only argument you could make that maybe they did was that car that they spotted driving up into the construction area, after the one that kind of distracted their attention before the bulldozer started. That might have been somebody that, hey, there's this thing and there's got this briefcase and we'll pay you, $5,000 to retrieve this briefcase and bring it to us, or something like that. But it does seem a bit of a stretch.
But they put the scent on the briefcase, or at least on the stones, specifically, knowing that they would eventually end up in the lake. So
yeah, I agree. I think it was meant as a distraction, but if you wanted to go the other direction, you could maybe construct an argument based on what's been presented.
True. Okay.
So anyway, they arrive at an apartment building. They arrive at an apartment building, then walk and hobble to the front door, and receiving no response to their knock, they just naturally let themselves in. I mean, that's what you do.
I mean, yeah, for sure.
They begin to poke around, and Laura finds a photo of Doak and a younger man at a swimming pool. A son, Laura posits, noting their similar features. They make their way down the hall to a bathroom. As they approach the room, they begin to smell something familiar. It's the same odor that was coming from the briefcase. Laura looks through the medicine cabinet and finds a bottle that looks like cologne. It's the source of the odor, but at full force, the odor is no longer pleasantly musky. It's revolting.
Was it just me, or did the camera angle as they're walking toward the bathroom make you feel vaguely seasick? It's a weird tilt. It feels like they're not... I don't know.
It's at a little bit of an angle.
Yeah, I just felt that it was a very strange way to film it. I'm not sure if it was meant to make the hallway feel smaller, but to me, I expected them to start rocking back and forth.
No, they do that later.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyway, at full force, the odor is no longer pleasant. It's revolting, and Laura comments that there's no way that it's a commercial cologne and that they can have it analyzed. But before she can recap it and put it in her purse to take it with them, Steele bumps her arm and some of the liquid splashes on his jacket.
Poor guy.
To his dismay. Yes.
He's going to stink.
Yeah. The bad news is Steele now stinks of the solution, but the good news is that they now know for certain, or even if they can't prove it, they know for certain that Dokes is involved in the theft of the jewels. They begin to walk back down the hall, back toward the front of the apartment. And as they do so, Laura, I guess on an impulse, opens a bedroom door. And Doke is there on the floor, dead, with a bottle of pills lying next to him.
He died on shag carpeting. Is that a worse? I can't think of a worse way to go, frankly. Like, that was... No, thanks. But also, like... I'm just wondering, because you said that there was a point in the episode where it feels like Laura might not have trusted him fully, or are we there? Because it feels like it's pretty obvious at this point that they were tricked.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's coming up.
Okay.
It's coming up. Next, we're at Steele's apartment. Clarissa. Boy, why do I have trouble with that name? Clarissa arrives. Laura invites her in, and as they walk into the living room, Steele comes out of the bathroom. Or, excuse me, he comes out of the bedroom. And he's in the process of zipping up his pants as he enters.
He has no problems whatsoever walking into a room with random strangers and, like, not having his pants on. Like, he seems real fine with this, which is... Mildred's one thing, but this is their client, and he's just like, "Yep, let me zip him up here."
Anyways, Clarissa apologizes, thinking that she's interrupted something, but Steele assures her that he's just freshening up after an unfortunate encounter with a bottle of toilet water.
The toilet?
Yeah, I was gonna say. I know that shouldn't he have said toilette? Yeah. Anyway, because I think that's the British version of it. Anyway, Laura
French.
and Remington.
It was French.
Well,
French.
Yeah, but I think that's how the British also say it, though, isn't it?
They just say toilet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, Laura and Remington say that they're glad to see Clarissa because they had wanted to talk to her. But she wants to talk to them first. The insurance company is withholding their fee while they investigate the loss of the jewels. Oh, great. Laura and Remington tell Clarissa that they're convinced that Doke is behind the disappearance of the jewels. And she looks at them, seemingly in shock, and says that paramedics got an anonymous phone call. Archie Doke was found dead of a heart attack. Empty bottle of nitroglycerin pills in his hand.
Second time these pills have popped up. Because they're molten. It was molten steel, wasn't it? Where they found them in the truck.
Yep. But there was no sign of the jewels. So Laura asks about Archie Doke. Did he have any friends, family? No, his family were his friends. He and his wife, Evie, had been married for 40 years, but she died a few months earlier. And their son, Todd, is a marine biologist at the Hayden Institute. Steele asks if there's any word on the street about the stones being moved. No, they've contacted all the fences that deal in that kind of merchandise, and there's nothing. Laura assures Clarissa that they will find the jewels. Clarissa says, well, they'd better also find the thief, because if they don't, everyone's going to say that they stole the jewels, then chickened out and decided to give them back. Next, we are at the Hayden Institute. Walk and hobble pass by numbers of buildings as they approach a young man.
Walk and hobble. That also sounds like a
law firm. Yeah.
Law firm, yeah.
They approach a young man who's working at an outdoor fish tank at the Institute, and they tell him that they're looking for Todd Doke. Well, sorry, they must have just missed him. Last time he saw Todd was about an hour ago. Was he expecting them? Oh, he must have forgotten. Well, not surprising. His dad just passed away. He was packing up to leave to take he was packing up to take a leave of absence to take the ashes back home to Rhode Island. Poor guy. He was so devoted to his dad. Anyway, his lab's over there. He may still be there. And as they're talking to the young man, Laura and Steele look down into the tank. that is full of sea snakes. Steele somewhat sarcastically calls them attractive creatures. Remind me of a woman I used to know in Nice.
Why did it have to be snakes? Sorry, someone had to.
Anyway, Laura gives him a sidelong glance, and Steele clarifies that, of course, she was blonde. The young man closes the grated hatch on the tank, and on that hatch is a sign that reads sea snakes. Hydrophis sinus
I'm glad this is your episode.
and hey, I want to do my Terry Lewis. Hey, lady.
See, I wouldn't have even attempted the Latin. I would have just skated right on by, but you're a braver person than I am. So.
No, that's a funny way to pronounce dumb. Anyway, he says that he can't say anything about Steele's woman and niece, but one bite from these guys and you'd be dead before you could say ouch.
Then why is he handling them with his bare hands?
Oh, he's not. He's tossing food down to them. They're not going to jump out.
No, he had them. He had them in his hand. Like he was dipping them in, like tossing the snakes into the thing with his hands, his bare hands.
I thought he was just feeding them.
No, I thought he was putting the actual snakes into, because when he closes it, you can see some snakes around the grate, which also begs the question as to like where those suckers are going to go.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's what they would do if he was feeding them. No, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't look to me like he's actually pulling snakes out of there, but it's hard to tell.
I thought he was putting them in.
No, I mean out of the bucket.
Oh, okay.
Out of the bucket.
Yeah, that's true. It is hard to tell, but I guess maybe that's why I was wondering why if they're going to kill you, would you touch them? But maybe.
Well, on the other hand, snake wranglers handle snakes. They handle some extremely poisonous snakes that will kill you, but they handle them. So I guess it's all technique. So anyway, let's see, where were we? Yes, the young man departs. Laura and Steele go to the lab area as indicated by the young man. And Laura asks Steele about the blonde and niece. And he says, world-class player, chemin de fer. And she asks him, but you prefer to remain here? And he says, well, like the man says, it's a question of bark versus bite. Lest you be fooled, Mr. Steele, I've been known to nip.
That
one can only hope,
line.
Mr. Holt.
Mr. Holt?
Or Miss Holt. Yeah, sorry.
That's a different episode entirely.
It's this exchange here, though. I've been known to nip, and one can only hope. I really think at this point, we can safely say that Laura and Remington would fit in very well with the crowd at Rancho Santa Luisa.
Yeah. I think this is interesting, too. If this were indeed, if we're going with our headcanon that we are switching those first two dreams, her line about you prefer to remain here would track with the insecurity of he's just going to take off and go back to the blonde and niece, which, or wherever he was in the dream. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But I do like I have been known to nip. And then his response was, that's probably my favorite line in the episode.
Anyway, when they get to the lab area, they find that the outer door is locked. Laura stands guard as Steele picks the lock, but as she's watching, she spots a helicopter with pontoons where landing skids would normally be attached. Laura suggests that Steele check out the helicopter while she looks around inside. Inside, Laura makes her way downstairs to an office marked Todd Doak, PhD, and finds that the office door is unlocked. So, of course, naturally, she just lets herself in.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do.
For sure.
There's a desk, filing cabinets, numerous storage cabinets and counters covered in bottles, vials, test tubes, and other paraphernalia. And on the far wall is a stuffed swordfish, along with other decorations. There's a window into the tank containing the sea snakes. And conveniently next to the window is a fire extinguisher and fire axe, because why wouldn't you have a fire axe in there? She looks around, picking up several bottles of unidentified liquid and smelling them. Hello. This is a lab. How dumb is it to stick your nose into a bottle of something and just take a good old whiff?
It could be worse. She could be what's his face from Due South and be licking everything.
And I didn't see that show.
Oh, it's Fraser has a tendency, no matter where they go, he will lick. Like he'll lick mud, he'll lick all sorts of things, and like it becomes a running joke within the series because Ray will be like, "You're not gonna lick it, are you?" And he'll be like, "Yep." So that's where Due South. Fraser already would have licked it. So
anyway, she walks over to the desk in the room. She spots a garbage can, and there's a vial inside. She picks it up and sniffs at that, which, of course, is a perfectly safe thing to do because nothing poisonous is ever in a vial. She pulls the cologne bottle out from her purse, and she does a comparative smell. And, yep, they're one and the same.
So I actually had to go to the script to figure out that they actually matched because to me it just looked, because I think it was just because she was so revolted when she smelled the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't seem to have that same, like, if it was so gross and such a unique smell, you'd think she wouldn't even need to compare them. So when she compares them, it looks to me like she was like, nope, they don't match, and she puts it back in the garbage. But then I read it. That was my false interpretation, clearly, because I read in the script that they do, and I'm like, oh, okay. In my opinion, it would have made more sense if she picked it up, smelled it, went, ugh, put it back in, and like, okay, yeah, that's it, right? Like I would have. Well,
from the look on her face when she did the comparison, I took it that they matched without.
Yeah, that one was probably just me not really catching it, but
her facial expression. Well, I'll just say that, yeah, it could be interpreted one way or the other, depending on what your expectation was. So, yeah. But yeah. She does, as you say, toss the vial back into the garbage, which
is weird because you'd think you'd take it as evidence.
Exactly. That's what I got written there. And
I think maybe that's another reason why I thought it wasn't a match, because she throws it back in the garbage.
Yeah. I mean, it might be evidence. It might even have fingerprints on it, assuming that she hadn't messed them up by picking it up without gloves.
And it would prove that father and son were in it together, because you find one in Dad's house, you find the other in, yeah.
Anyway, she puts the cologne bottle back into her purse, drops her purse onto the desk, and then walks over to the window. And she begins having a conversation with the snakes. Ever play chemin de fer? And as she's looking at the snakes, she's leaning over one side and the other, and then she off to the side, and this is an important thing to note, she sees a metal locked box at the bottom of the tank, and a thought strikes her. Outside, Steele is examining the helicopter, and in addition to the normal flight controls and instruments, we are shown a large electronic device within a video screen. Next, we see Laura. She's at the top of the tank containing the sea snakes. She opens the hatch. Wait, what?
Which is not locked? Which is not locked. No, it is not. Nothing's locked in this Institute of Oceanography. Not the doors, not the vicious sea snake hatch, nothing. It's just all wide open.
Yeah, just go ahead. Yeah, hop on in. Go swimming with the snakes.
Swim,
yes. Yeah. Well, she reaches out with a long-handled net and tries to fish out the box, but the net handle doesn't quite reach, so she leans into the opening, trying to get that extra few inches to scoop up the box. And behind her, we see a man, the same man that we'd first seen in that photo back at Archie Doak's apartment, the photo that Laura found. It's Archie's son, Todd Doak. He comes up behind Laura and pushes her into the tank, closes it, and then locks it. Yeah. Anyway, Laura comes to the surface and, finding the hatch locked, begins hollering for help. And that's an important thing to note.
Yep.
Back inside the lab area, Steele makes his way to Todd Doak's office.
She left her purse there. Why would you?
Wait. No, we haven't even gotten there yet. We've already got a problem, and we haven't even gotten there yet. Didn't he just walk past the tank that she's in?
Yeah. I guess he's probably not looking for her, though, to be fair.
But she's calling for help.
Yeah, she was. Okay.
And we know from earlier that from what we saw of where the things are relative to each other, he had to walk past the tank to get to the lab. He would have seen her or heard her. Or more realistically, or just as realistically, had seen Todd shove her into the tank.
Yeah, fair
enough. Hand wave. Inside, Steele calls out for Laura. The room's not that large. What does he think? She's hiding from him?
Right? Yeah, he looks in the garbage. Like, where is a hand going to come out? Like, hey, just hanging out.
Yeah. So anyway, he walks over to the window, looks into the tank and sees the snakes. And then he turns back and walks toward the center of the room just as Laura appears into the window, grabbing the box. Wait a second. She had to lean over and look into the side to see the box when she was there. But we see from the other direction that the box is right straight in front of the window. Okay, so the geography has me confused. But, it wasn't there when Steele looked out the window into the tank. So
that water also looks vile. And I do not I don't envy Stephanie.
No, she did all this herself.
Like, she's doing that. She's pounding against the glass. Like, kudos, Stephanie, because that looks like it's real nasty, that water.
Yeah. I mean, it may just be lighting and other things, but yeah, it doesn't look like it would have been a nice.
No.
Yeah. I mean, you've heard about actors getting illnesses from doing water scenes. You could imagine that she might have gotten pretty sick from this sort of thing.
Yeah, looks pretty gross.
Anyway, Laura takes the box up to the top and leaves it somewhere. I guess it must be floating on top of the water. She comes back down to the window, this time holding the net, and then she disappears again. Steele spots the garbage can, spots the vial, bends over to pick it up. He glances back over to the window. No Laura. He sniffs the vial, which of course is a perfectly safe thing to do because nothing poisonous is ever in a vial. Laura again appears at the window, attempting to attract Steele's attention by banging on the glass and hollering.
He doesn't hear. Wouldn't
he have at least heard a bumping sound?
Because here's the thing. If the glass is thin enough to break, he would have heard a bumping sound. If it's too thick to break, he would not have been able to get her out. So it's one or the other. Like if it's so thick that like you wouldn't, because you could have it be like double layered plexiglass, like it's so thick that he didn't hear it, then he wouldn't be able to smash it with a fire extinguisher or an axe or whatever it is he uses.
Anyway, repulsed by the smell of the vial, Steele drops it back into the garbage can. He sits down at the desk and we see that Laura's no longer at the window. Steele pulls a book from the desk, thumbs through it briefly, then puts it back. Laura is again at the window, and again she's attempting to attract Steele's attention by banging on the glass and hollering. Steele spots Laura's purse on the desk, absently picks it up, and begins examining it until realization slowly dawns on him. He turns around and is startled by the sight of Laura's face distorted in the glass window. He jumps up, runs over, grabs the fire axe that is just conveniently hanging on the wall next to the window because why wouldn't there be a fire axe there? And then he smashes the glass. And water and sea snakes immediately come pouring through the window, and after a moment, so does Laura, screaming. Steele rushes over to her, helps her up as she continues screaming. She shakes snakes out of her hair, and then the two rush out of the room with Laura still screaming. Can't say I blame her.
No, I would probably scream for a good hour after.
Yeah. And I mean, if you watch it, if you're not paying a real close attention, you might miss it. But yes, as she shakes her head, a snake definitely comes out
of her hair. Yeah.
Yeah. Outside in the hall, Steele urges her to calm down, asking if she's all right. And she shrieks that it wasn't a fair fight because they have more teeth than she does.
Which again, if they're going to like kill you and they like, if one bite can kill you, I find it very hard to believe that you wouldn't have that she wouldn't have sustained a single bite, especially if there was one in her hair.
Yeah, but if they'd been fed and they weren't feeling threatened.
Well, if it's tangled in her hair, I'd say that would be pretty threatening for.
You'd think so.
Anyway.
Steele pulls out his handkerchief from his jacket pocket, which is soaking wet.
Yeah.
He tries to wipe her down her face with it. I mean, that's kind of like almost pointless. Telling her that she more than held her own. And she asked, better than his blonde niece? Oh, Laura, this isn't a competition. Laura shoves the metal box at him and orders him to open it. Using the tip of the umbrella, Steele breaks off the hasp from the box. Yeah, not very secure box, is it? He opens it, and inside they find a fish head. Annoyed at having gone to all the trouble for nothing, Steele dumps the fish head on the floor. He's annoyed. She went to did all the work.
I know, right?
He's annoyed.
She should be pissed.
So anyway, when Laura explains that she had the idea that the Royal Laviolite might have been in the box, Steele responds that, well, perhaps it had been. He also informs her that the helicopter has a tracking device, the sort of thing that could have been used to track the rabbit. Back at the office, Mildred is fielding phone calls as Laura and Remington enter. She asks if they've had any luck. Yes, all of it bad. And I want to hear that song from Hee Haw in my head.
Yep.
Laura and Remington head to his office, followed by Mildred, and she sums up the morning that she's had. Clients are calling, canceling their appointments, and what should she tell them? In response to her question, Steele, who headed straight for the decanter and poured himself a drink, asks her if she wants a drink. Sounds like a good solution to me, right? Yeah.
Why not?
She'll have a snort of whatever he's got. Oh, and this telegram came. She holds it out for Steele, but Laura snatches it, and she gets a look. Mildred gets a look on her face like, oh, yeah, sorry about that. Laura silently reads the telegram and then says she didn't think it was possible for things to get any worse, but they have. The telegram is from the State Bureau of Investigative Service. They've suspended their license pending an inquiry into the loss of the Royal Laviolite. She hands the telegram to Steele, who looks at it for himself. Laura opens her purse, reaches in, and as she does, water comes pouring out. She pulls out the cologne bottle, hands it to Mildred, and asks her to run it to the lab. Tell them it's a rush. And then, after she leaves, Laura tells Steele that maybe it's time for showers and a fresh change of clothes. After all, they have an image to uphold.
Yeah.
Which, harkens back to the episode in season 1 where she wants him to go meet with the grocery store client, and he's got to go change. Remington Steele never appears rumpled.
Yeah.
So we see Steele in the shower, which fades into a dream sequence, which starts with Steele in a shower. Someone's leaning on the front door buzzer. Steele gets out of the shower with a robe thrown over an undershirt and boxer shorts that he's wearing that are covered with hearts and a towel around his neck. And he goes to answer it, having to kick things out of the way as he does. It's Laura. She forgot her key, and she is hidden behind 2 large grocery sacks, but we see her fedora peeking over the top. And did you notice she has her foot up on the door frame?
Yeah, I did.
Did she use that to ring the doorbell?
It looks like it.
It does. Yeah. Steele takes the grocery sacks, and we see that Laura is pregnant. Very pregnant. Steele carries the bags to the sideboard, chanting, "Pretzels! Did you get the pretzels?" as he starts pawing through the bags looking for pretzels. Laura steps through the door, takes off her fedora, revealing a head full of curlers. She has gone full 1950s domestic.
I guess this is his dream, right? So at least in this dream, he's imagining that they've both let themselves go, because he definitely wouldn't be caught dead in boxers with little hearts on them.
No, definitely not. Anyway, Steele, Laura, where were we here? Yeah, there we go. Laura goes to Steele and begins running her hands over him, asking if she's interrupted his shower. And distracted and finally finding his pretzels, he says, "Yeah, no problem." And Laura asks if he'd like to continue his shower, but with a bit of company. And she begins kissing his neck, but Steele is annoyed at her untimely amorous desires. After all, the ball game is starting.
He's apparently, what?
He's got full domestic on this.
It's so again, this is perhaps I don't want to say the weirdest one of all, but it's weird in the sense that is his fear that if they get together that he's suddenly going to start watching sports or wearing horrible boxers, or and if that were the case, like they seem to have a lot of babies hanging around. Wouldn't that mean he's getting what he wants physically from her at the very least? But in this case, both dreams he's rejecting her physical advances in both cases.
Well, that's true. I hadn't thought of that, but to me, I've got a little bit different interpretation of the dream, and I'll get to that
okay.
a little bit later. Anyway, he breaks free from her and rushes over to his recliner, which is in the middle of the living room, sitting in front of the television. The room's a bit of a disaster area. It's cluttered with baby things, playpens, cribs, toys of all kinds, baby wipes, powders, not to mention magazines and newspapers.
And their couch is different too. It's hideous now. It's like what, Naugahyde or something. Like it's really ugly.
Yeah, it's.
I guess once you have children, you can't have nice things. No, actually, that tracks. Sorry, no, I'm on board with that part of the dream.
Yeah, it's it's not Naugahyde. It's a fabric, but it's not. It's not the classy sofa that it was
pretty
before.
Ugly.
Yeah. So anyway, he sits down in his recliner and there's a squeak sound. He gets up slightly, grabs a rubber squeak toy from underneath his rear end and gives it a blind toss behind him and then calls out, "Want to get me a beer, Nora?"
So, I have a couple of questions here. One, he says the ball game is on. Now, I don't want, like, as we've clarified, as a Canadian, the only sport I watch has a puck. But it seems to me when you say the ball game is on, you're referring to baseball, or at least that's what I assume. If you were to say, if you're talking about football, it seems to me you would say the football game is on.
Yeah.
Like I've never heard somebody refer to football as the ball game. Like that seems anyway. So is that intentional? Because I got the impression, and again, maybe this could just be me, but I got the impression, and if it's wrong, it's a shame, because this I thought was quite funny. The way I interpreted it was that he knows so little about sports that the sport keeps changing in his nightmare. That he says ball game, and then later on he mentions touchdown. And in my head, I was like, well, yeah, that tracks. He doesn't know anything about sports. So like for him, it's all interchangeable, right? But the script, it doesn't say that. So it's a shame, because I thought that was funny, but apparently that's just me.
No, I think there are people that refer to football as a ball game, but yeah, you're right. When I think ball game, I think baseball, but that's
a shame though, because it would be funny if it was literally just him like not knowing a thing about sports and just being like, yeah, the ball game's on. Oh, there's a touchdown, and it's like a baseball game.
Well, there is something that does support your version of it, although I don't think it's intended to do that. I don't think it was intended to be that scenario that you're describing, but there is something that you could use to create that argument. And it comes up right about here, because Laura digs through the groceries for a beer. Steele is stretched out in his chair watching the ball game, and he hollers, "All right, Deacon, way to hit. That's my boy. Sack him, sack him."
Yeah, that's what.
Which, you go ahead.
No, you keep going, because
it sounds like a reference to David D. Deacon Jones, but there's a problem. The episode was done in 1984. Deacon Jones, although he played in the National Football League for 14 seasons, it was from 1964 through the 1974 season.
Right.
So he had stopped playing football 10 years before this
Steele
episode.
Would not have that kind of knowledge about any particular sports. Like, he doesn't know thing one about football or baseball. So
yeah, but see, this is where it would make sense with your theory.
Yeah,
because
he was just like mixing up the sports.
He knows nothing about baseball. He knows nothing about football. He's probably heard the name Deacon Jones, and so in his dream, he's dreaming Deacon Jones, even though Deacon Jones hadn't played football for 10 years.
He thought shooting hoops was like a gun,
a bird.
like a bird. Yeah, like this is a guy who knows absolutely sweet F all about sports, and we see that when they in second base Steele in a later episode when he doesn't know anything about baseball either. So like, are we to assume no, you wouldn't. I like my theory. I'm sticking with my theory.
Well, just while we're here talking about Deacon Jones, because I did do a little looking up on him, because I'm sure that that's the reference that's supposed to be being made here. Jones specialized in sacks, which was a term he coined.
Right.
He was nicknamed the Secretary of Defense, considered one of the greatest defensive players ever. He, let's see here. He gave himself the name of Deacon after joining the Rams because there were too many David Joneses in the local phone book. And he picked it in part because football is a violent world and Deacon has a religious connotation.
It does.
And he thought the name would be remembered. Oh. Also, interestingly enough, unrelated to football, Jones was a rhythm and blues singer during his football days and was backed by a band called The Night Shift, which later became the group War. What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing. I feel like they missed an opportunity for the Blues Brothers, but okay. Like
Jones sang on stage with Ray Charles. He performed at the Hollywood Palace and on the Merv Griffin Show and was the inspiration for the name of the song 1977 Deacon Blues by Steely Dan.
That's crazy. That it just goes to show how kind of like wacky some sports stuff gets. Because like we were watching the Keanu Reeves movie, The Replacements. Have you ever seen that one? 2000, and it's based off of like loosely based off of a actual thing that happened, but like very loosely in which there's a players strike in the NFL, and they call in these scabs, essentially replacement players of people who were like either never quite made it to professional level or who were it's a ragtag comedy, so there are all kinds of weird and wacky talents that they have that they put together to make this replacement team. But it's loosely based off of a players strike from like 1987, I think it was, with the Washington Redskins. In the film they call them the Washington Sentinels, so they avoid the actual name of the team altogether. But and it's a very funny movie. If you ever get the chance, you should see it. But like there is a character, it just made me think of that because there is a character who is very like religious in the film who is on the team and keeps quoting the Bible at every opportunity. And there's a scene where they break out into a bar fight and he's like, Jesus preached non-violence. And then someone comes at him and he beats the living ever loving out loud of the guy. He's like, yeah, but if you gotta do what you gotta do, sort of thing. So like, yeah.
Well, rabbit trail. You mentioned the Replacements. And that made me think of, and you specifically mentioned about them being players who didn't quite make it or were tired or whatever. Made me think, A to B to C to Z. There is a special, or it's a documentary on Netflix called The Battered Bastards of Baseball.
Oh, I watched it. You recommended it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's Portland Mavericks, owned by,
Kurt Russell's dad.
Kurt Russell's dad, yeah. And Kurt Russell was on the team. Kurt Russell narrates the documentary. And it was that sort of a thing. I mean, these were basically that caliber of player. They were the replacements, the baseball equivalent of that. But yeah,
if you watch The Replacements, because you'll definitely get that vibe from it. Now that you mention it, it definitely fits. And it's funny because I am in a union, so I'm watching this movie going,
I got a problem with this. I got a problem with that.
Because I saw it in 2000 when it came out. I was a teenager. So now I'm watching it as part of a union going, not sure how I feel about this, but also a lot of this doesn't line up. Like, are all the other teams replacement teams? Because they'd have to be if the entire NFL was having a player strike, in which case they're not so special if they're all using replacement players. And also, why are the cheerleaders holding auditions? They're part of a different union, are they not? Sorry, I went down too many rabbit holes watching it, but it's very entertaining.
They're part of a union, so they wouldn't cross the picket line and attend the games, so they had to bring in replacement cheerleaders.
Sure, okay. They end up getting exotic dancers. You should see it. Anyway.
Wait, you mean the cheerleaders that they normally have aren't?
No, yeah, that's fair. It's a fine line.
Anyway, so Laura brings Steele his beer, and then she plops herself down on his lap which Steele doesn't appreciate. She's blocking his view of the game and crushing his pretzels and pressing the sharp corners of the TV remote into his groin. She begins to cuddle him and kiss him, asking, "What do you say, lover? When it comes to ball games, you want to be an observer or a participant?"
Ooh, okay.
Little spicy line there.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm not sure that, well, sack him, that puts that one into different context too. All I'm going to say.
Anyway, Steele is somewhat agitated at the unwelcome interruption to his game. I mean, after all, one has to have priorities.
He's watching sports ball.
He asks with great frustration in his voice, "Don't you ever get enough?" Undeterred, Laura grabs the remote, turns off the television, and continues her attempted seduction, suggesting that she'll heat up the jar of emotion potion.
Ugh. I'm sorry. I just cringe whenever I hear that. Like,
well, Steele cruelly suggests that if she could heat him up a 20-year-old, they'd have a deal.
20-year-old blonde.
Oh, yeah.
He specifically says blonde here, which keeps with this whole trend that aside from Laura, that's his type.
Yeah. But, that seems excessively mean, even for a dream.
Yeah, like all of this is vicious. Like, I'm sorry, to be fair, at least with this dream, he's as hard on himself as he is on her. Whereas in the previous dreams, both of them, they paint themselves in the best light and the other person in this horrible light. In this case, I guess, it's equally as insulting that she'd become this wanton, like, let herself go, throwing herself at him at every second of the minute of the day. She's whatever, throwing herself into his lap. Like, that's equally as insulting, I guess, as the fact that he doesn't even want to touch her. He just did we stumble into an episode of Married with Children?
I haven't seen that show, so I don't know.
Okay.
But, it's ironic, though, because isn't that kind of his fantasy of what he wants Laura to be?
You would literally think, like, available at all times, but I guess it's not flattering to him because it implies that he either doesn't want her to want him, or he only wants her to want him as long as she looks perfect and isn't, I don't know, whatever the interpretation of it, nobody comes out smelling like roses. They come out smelling like that cologne that they've found on the briefcase, right? Like, so, and what, he's just going to become this lazy layabout who treats her like crap if what?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, Steele turns the TV back on and then realizes that he's missed the touchdown, and he expresses his annoyance at Laura for it.
Yeah, sure. He missed the touchdown because he's watching baseball.
No, because she turned the TV off.
Okay.
Anyway, setting down the remote control in a particularly interesting location on her belly.
Yeah.
He says that the game reminds him of the time that he was pretending to be a mercenary in Malaysia so that he could smuggle out the imperial art treasures. And I'm not sure I see the connection.
Yeah, no, I don't see it either at all. But this is probably the only part of the dream that feels truthful. That feels like it is an underlying fear of his, that she will get bored. That is why he's withholding his past, because he's afraid if he reveals. We've said this before. We talked about this with various other episodes where he's afraid I think he's honestly afraid that the truth is a letdown. He's not this mysterious man of mystery. He's not this whatever it is that he is. He's just an unwanted little boy who didn't have a family. And that's not exciting, or at least not to him, right?
That could partially be true, but I've always thought that it was because he was, or at least in part, he was afraid that if she found out about his past, it would be too much for her, that she couldn't accept it. There were things in his past that she would just, no, I can't have anything to do with that. But I mean, your interpretation could very well be right.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true for some of the things he's done, like the crimes he's committed. But the actual truth, because she keeps bugging him about his name, which of course we find out later on he doesn't know.
He doesn't know,
and that would be the easiest thing for him to tell her, because it's not a crime not to know who you are. Like, there's nothing in that that's his fault.
Well, I don't know. In some countries, it probably is.
Okay, fair. But like, there's nothing in his lack of knowledge of his own identity that is a crime or that's his fault or that's something he's done. So if there should be anything that he'd be okay with telling her, especially 2 years in, I could see why he wouldn't want to say it at the beginning. 2 years in, it should be that. But I could see him worrying that it's a letdown. I don't want to say a letdown because it's maybe not where I'm going with it, but that it's not. I think maybe he likes the idea that she's at least intrigued by him, that there's mystery, that there's intrigue, there's whatever. And that if he just admits that nobody wanted him, like that's his worst, like that's the worst thing about himself for him. Like that's what we get when he talks to Amy Fogelson, like this little boy who was rejected by everybody around him, that was treated like crap. Like there's nothing exciting about that. It's just tragic. And so it could be that maybe this is the only part of the dream I find truthful, where he's like, well, this reminds me of this time where I did this, this, and this. And she's like, boring, don't care.
Well, you know, after he tells this one, and then he does go into another one. At this one, Laura rolls her eyes and she says she's heard the story 1,000 times and his past was so much more exciting. And this is
well, she could imagine all the kinky stuff. What?
Yes, exactly. That's like, okay, another Rancho Santa Luisa connection here.
I'm sorry, what?
And, you know, again, I have to think that maybe this is an insight into what Steele's interests may be, or what he imagines Laura's may be.
Lord Marchmain's memoirs spring into mind. Like, was there a watermelon involved?
Anyway, and then he tries to tell her about the time he crept into the Palace of Versailles and replaced all the mirrors with one-way glass.
That's funny.
That's what she says.
That's actually funny. I don't think that's boring. I think that's funny.
So anyway, at this point, she's hopped off of Steele's lap. It's obvious that he's not interested in playing the games that she wants to play. And so she heads out of the room, grabbing a few things along the way, including a stuffed, oversized rabbit, which, okay, the rabbit's dead.
Maybe that's where that's the symbology of it, right? She's carrying the rabbit because, you know, you got to be careful with that thing. It keeps getting destroyed.
Well, I was thinking from the standpoint of, you know, the rabbit's dead.
Catch that carrot. Yes.
You know, if you understand the connotation there, the rabbit's dead.
I get it.
Yeah. Anyway, Laura gets to the door and let's see. The front buzzer rings. Laura comes out of the bedroom carrying two babies, twins by all appearances, and she heads to the front door to answer it because, no, don't bother getting up, Mr. Steele. After all, you've got your hands full with the remote and the pretzels.
They didn't waste any time, did they? Those babies are not very old. I'm thinking that he maybe missed a few sex ed classes.
Yeah, well, I'm a little more focused on the point that he didn't even bother to get up to answer the door.
No, of course not.
He let put that in sarcasm quotes, let her do it while carrying two babies.
Does this mean that his nightmare is I guess it would be somewhat flattering if it was a nightmare to him that she turn into a doting housewife but it also is a nightmare that he starts treating her like crap. Like I'm really struggling to find the
meaning. Yeah.
Like beyond the surface level of he doesn't want their lives to turn into an episode of Married with Children, which, okay, but that's really easy to, like, that's low hanging fruit. We know this. So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, anyway, Laura gets to the door and manages to open it while still holding the babies. And Mildred is outside telling the Count, whoever that is, that she'll be just a minute.
Monte Cristo. I don't know.
Mildred is dressed to the nines. She greets Laura with a saccharine tone and gives her a socially expected but insincere kiss on the cheek. Gives her little Laura and little Remington their socially expected but insincere kisses.
It's interesting the babies are Laura and Remington, but Laura is referred to as Nora.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. and he doesn't get a name.
Yeah.
So anyway, Mildred comes into the living room. Go ahead.
He doesn't get a name.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Got it. I got it. Anyway, let's see where yes. Mildred comes into the living room, gives Steele his socially expected but insincere kiss, and when asked how business is going at the agency, just raves. It's great. It's a big year. Oh, it's a big year, my darling. It seems that everyone has a reason for hiring a private detective. And then she asks him, how's his job going at the auto plant?
He doesn't know anything about cars.
I suppose you don't have to. It's, just an assembly line job. You put this part in there and
that's only
screw
true
it down
if
and
you
pass it on to the next guy.
That's only true if you work for Ford.
Guess what? Guess what? In 1984, there were 2 assembly plants, one for General Motors in Fremont, one for Ford in San Jose. I'm sorry.
A tale of 2 auto plants?
San Jose assembly plant at Milpitas, California, Milpitas, whatever it is. So, yeah, it could have been a Ford assembly plant.
Yeah. Found on road dead, fix or repair daily. Friggin' old rebuilt Dodge. That's what my dad used to say.
Anyway, where were we here? Yes, Steele tells Mildred that losing their PI license was the best thing that ever happened to them. No more late night stakeouts, no more dodging bullets at every turn. Now, once the whistle blows at 5, it's straight home to Nora and the kiddies. Mildred, not caring about Steele's comments, dismissively says, how quaint. Laura asks when Mildred and the Count are going to settle down and start a family, and Mildred is aghast. Oh, darling, me, a housewife, over my dead body.
Well, okay. Also, I think nature might disagree with you on that. She's, I think, past the clock in terms of...
Might be, yeah.
I don't, again, it's not impossible. There have been instances, but yeah, I guess this is a dream. So,
yeah.
Steele, again, if we're going by the theory that Steele failed sex ed, this would track.
As far as this dream and what it means for Steele, I don't know. I guess I'm vacillating, or I'm starting to change my mind. To me, yes, it's kind of almost a horror dream for him, but I don't know. In some ways, it's almost like there's almost an element of glad that we're out of the PI business in it. It's not a strong one, but it still seems like there's a little bit of a one. Losing the PI license, best thing that's ever happened to him. No more late night stakeouts, no more dodging bullets. And in some ways, his life as Remington Steele mirrors his life as a con artist, because he was always, running from the cops and dodging, maybe not bullets, but he was always dodging somebody or something. And so maybe in a sense, he's looking at the alternative and thinking, it might be kind of boring, but maybe there's something to it. I don't know.
It's funny, as you started saying that, I thought you were going to go a different route, because I started to realize that all of these elements of this domestic situation that he's imagining are things that he wouldn't have any personal knowledge of whatsoever, but things he has seen in movies. So, like, because I mentioned he's never had a family, so he wouldn't know what mom and dad look like or how they behave towards one another, because that's never been something that he's seen. He's only ever been shunted from relative to relative, and probably people that were not very nice to each other, much less to the child that they've taken in for the government stipend. So for him, he's probably put together this hodgepodge of, like, some of it bad, some of it good, elements of what it means to be domestic, right down to the fact that he has no idea what sport he's watching. It could be a touchdown, it could be a ball game. He's not sure, because he never had a dad to watch one. It just didn't happen that way. So if we look at it from that perspective, this would make sense as to how, like you said, some of it feels like it wouldn't be that bad. Like, he'd be able to settle down, like he'd be able to have a family, which we know he wants on some level, even if he's never said right out, like, I want to have a wife and kids. He's expressed envy towards people who have been able to do that. So We know
Mhm.
that there's that element there. So, like, yeah, it makes sense that he maybe wouldn't know what it looks like fully. Although the Mildred thing throws it kind of for a loop because, like,
Yeah.
uh, that
Yeah.
one's, I like that. I like that element of it, that she's suddenly engaged to account. It's basically like made their business far more successful than they managed to do.
And she's that stereotypical highfalutin, I'm so far above the rest of the world.
I would never, over my dead body. Ouch. Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, back in the real world, as Steele hears the word body echoing his mind from the dream, it all suddenly comes to him. He knows where the jewels are hidden. Next, it's night. Laura and Remington, dressed in their crime clothes. And by the way, I love that term. You came up with it. I love that term.
That should be a T-shirt. Like,
These are my crime clothes.
Put on your crime clothes. We're doing crime. I can't take credit for it. I got it from a Buffy episode. I'm sorry. Don't hit me.
Oh, now I'm so disappointed. I can't use it ever again.
I didn't get crime clothes from, I just got we're doing crime. So crime clothes I did come up with. We're doing crime is not me. So you can continue to use crime clothes.
Anyway.
Yeah.
They're hiding behind a concrete wall watching the entrance of the Jones funeral home. And it's like, couldn't they come up with a better name? I mean, is this the business version of the company that gets things done?
Yeah, it could be. The funeral home that gets things done.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
The funeral home that gets bodies buried.
Yeah. City morgue, you stab them, we slab them. Anyway.
Yeah, Roadkill Cafe. You kill them, we grill them.
Home of the Whopper, what's your beef? So we can keep going like this.
Anyway, Steele lets out with a seemingly nonsensical sing-song, EO11. Yeah. And Laura gives him a quizzical look. Steele explains, Ocean's 11, Frank Sinatra, Richard Conte, and the Rat Pack. Warner Brothers, 1960. Sinatra plays a former army man who recruits his old platoon to rob some Las Vegas casinos on New Year's Eve. But after they rob the casinos, Richard Conte dies of a heart attack, and his buddies decide to hide the money in his coffin so they can get it out of town without the police finding it. Interesting thing about the Rat Pack. What do you think of when you think of the term Rat Pack? If you're, I assume you have some familiarity with.
Yeah. Well, Frank Sinatra and the other names he mentioned, that's who I think of, unless you say Brat Pack, in which case I think of Emilio Estevez and Molly Ringwald.
No, not Brat Pack. Rat Pack.
Yeah.
I think most people do think of Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah.
They were not the original Rat Pack.
Huh.
The Rat Pack was a loosely formed group of entertainers focused on the late 1950s and 60s Las Vegas casino scene. Was originally created around Humphrey Bogart and his circle of friends, which included Judy Garland, David Niven, Angie Dickinson, talent agent Swifty Lazar, restaurateur Mike Romanoff, and the only name that carried forward, Frank Sinatra.
Huh.
And it was the later incarnations, which included Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, which is the version that most people think about.
Yeah.
And according to Stephen Bogart, son of Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, the term originated when his mother walked in on his father and the rest of the group, the original group, during a particularly drunken weekend in Las Vegas, telling them that they looked like a rat pack.
Huh.
And the song EO11 that Steele references is a song from the movie Ocean's 11, but it's not the theme song, or at least not the movie title's theme, which is what most people would term as the movie's theme song. It's a song sung by Sammy Davis Jr. as part of a scene during the course of the movie. And that got me going down the rabbit trail of EO11. What does that mean? And there's a couple of different, slightly different explanations for it. In general terms, or specifically, it's a term for a perfect craps game gone sour in one version. The general concept being a person who wishes and achieves the perfect life. You have money, power, and so many ways to show it off. With a block-long limousine and its driver, a penthouse with spending money laying about, and good-looking people surrounding you, and then suddenly it's taken from you in an instant, like as if a single roll of the dice destroyed your life and dreams. And apparently the actual term is YO11. Craps dealers would typically add a name or an accent to a number since the tables can get loud and numbers confused. The numbers 7 and 11 can make or break a game, but are often confused. So dealers help clear up things by saying Yo 11 or 11 yo-yo or Ye-O 11. And the song references that as 11 is always a winner, either in the field or on the pass line, and when a point is on, and a 7 is a losing roll. So the song talks about the money and the things that he would have with the roll of Ye-O 11. And the producers found that this was an appropriate thing considering the movie takes place in Las Vegas, which is a town famous for gambling. So, yeah.
Did I don't know if you know this, but have you seen the remake?
No, I haven't even seen the original.
Okay, so the remake and the original have very different endings.
Okay.
And Steele references the original here where they end up burning the money because it's in the coffin, right?
Yeah. I don't think the remake was out at this time, was it?
No, the remake didn't come out until 2001.
Okay.
2001, yeah. And it was done by Steven Soderbergh. So I don't care for the remake for a number of reasons. I'm not a fan of Brad Pitt and I'm not a fan of George Clooney. So you put them both in a film together and I'm like, eh. But
don't those two negative things cancel each other out? You know,
no,
two
you would
negatives
think
become
they
a
do,
positive.
but they don't. But the movie, the money doesn't end up getting burned in the remake. And that was actually, ironically, it was reshot at the last minute because of what happened with 9/11 in the trade centers. Apparently the team was like the hotel was supposed to be destroyed by explosives, but they thought that might be a little too similar to the recent attacks at the World Trade Center. So the location was changed. They end up getting away with the money, if I remember correctly. Whereas they don't in the original. The money is burned along with their companions. So I personally kind of prefer that ending because I don't know, I'm weird that way, but it is widely regarded to be one of by everybody else but me, to be one of the few remakes that surpasses the original. Take of that what you will. I prefer the original, but
yeah, I prefer the remake of Thomas Crown to the original.
Yeah, same. I do too. So. But not in this case. Although I liked Ocean's 8, which was nothing to do with any of this.
Anyway, after Steele gives his explanation, Laura is either unimpressed or doesn't see the connection or both until Steele reveals that the flaw in the movie's plan was that Richard, as you said, Richard Conte's wife has him cremated.
Yeah.
And it dawns on Laura, oh, yeah, but cremation wouldn't hurt Royal Avulite. Then the doors to the funeral home open and Todd Doak and the funeral director step out. After a moment's discussion, they shake hands, Todd leaves, and the funeral director goes back inside. Laura hops over the wall, Steele crawls over it, and then they walk and hobble over to the door of the funeral home.
Again, crime clothes, but no masks. So it's kind of pointless.
Anyway, Steele picks the lock, letting them in, and then they walk and hobble down the hall to the gallery of caskets, then around the corner to a shelf where the cremated mortal remains of various people are stored in cheaply made wooden boxes sprayed with gold-colored paint. I mean, seriously, you're not only gonna put the ashes in a cheap box that isn't even as nice looking as a jewelry box, but then you're gonna just set them on a shelf in a hallway where anybody can get to them and paw around in them like books in a library.
I would also like to point out, my dad was cremated and he currently sits on my piano. So I can say with relative certainty that your box would be bigger. Those boxes are... No. I just mean... Okay. I just mean, like, if you're cremating a whole person, those boxes are too small. Even a small person, and we know Archie Doak was not a small man. So, like, they're like, because my dad's is like this. Is
it completely full, or is there a lot of airspace? It's full
and it's heavy. Like,
oh, okay.
Yeah, not to this got weird, but like, I was, and I would not have occurred to me had I not, like, I guess if you've never had an urn or somebody's ashes in your possession, this wouldn't clue in. But I'm watching this going, that should be bigger. That box should be far bigger. Like, that's way too small to create a whole human. So,
So anyway, they find the box with Archie Doak's ashes, but there is no royal labulite buried in them. Then they hear a door open. 2 workers are bringing in a new guest to the Bates Motel. Sorry, Jones Funeral Home. Sorry, home improvement sidetrack there. With their exit route occupied by the 2 workers, Laura and Steele decide to hide in a casket. They listen as the 2 workers roll in a cart, which has the new attendee, who is merely wrapped in a plastic bag, and then they leave him in the hallway.
Not the most professional of funeral homes, for sure.
Yeah, this has got to be one of the worst funeral homes in existence. Yeah. Well, just then, a figure enters. To begin with, we only see the feet as it moves over to the casket containing Laura and Steele. And then we see a gloved hand as they flip down the hasp on the casket and slide what looks like a door lock pull from an older car through the mechanism, which traps Laura and Steele inside. Then the figure pulls a nameplate from another casket and slides it into the nameplate holder on the casket containing Laura and Steele. Inside the casket, coffin, I'm not sure what the difference is.
I'm sure there is one, but I don't know either.
Inside the box, Laura starts having issues. Well, this is just great. 4 years of college, 2 years of apprenticeship, 3 years of building up an agency, and poof, my license is suspended and I'm stuck in a coffin with you. I should have never put you in charge of protecting those jewels. And Steele says, well, what would you have done differently, Detective Holt? And she says, the problem is not your competence. And I think that's an important preface to what comes later in my comments that are coming up. The problem is that I stupidly went ahead and did what I swore I'd never do, put my fate in someone else's hands. Steele says, well, maybe it's time you realize that none of us are ever in complete control of our fates. She says, well, then why do I feel embarrassed? Why do I feel guilty? I didn't steal the jewels. Okay, first of all, why is she mad at Steele?
Well, she's not. She's mad at herself.
Is she?
She's mad at herself. Oh,
well,
yeah,
yes, I know she's mad at herself, but
yeah.
Isn't she kind of mad at Steele too?
She's taking it out on him, but I think she's mad at herself.
It seems a mix because it seems that she's angry at herself for trusting someone to do something instead of being a micromanager and doing everything herself. Because, I mean, clearly no one else can do anything right, just her. And 2, I think she blames someone else for the situation that they're in. I think she blames Steele for the loss of the jewels. Maybe not for stealing them, but I'm not even too sure about that. But I think here she does have some question about his involvement. At the very least, his responsibility.
See, I got something totally different from this. This is and maybe this goes back to me questioning at the beginning why she would not have any knowledge of his plan whatsoever. Like, that seems very out of character. When she talks in Elegy and Steele, when she talks about how, like, she needs to be the one in control all of the time because it's the only way that she can be sure of what's going to happen, right? And I personally, when she said that, I took that, like, I do this all the time. I'll get mad about something that is maybe my fault or even maybe not. It's maybe not my fault, but like, an accident's happened and I blame myself for it, but I'll maybe somewhat unfairly take it out on those around me that are trying to help because I'm angry at a situation that nobody is at fault for. Maybe it's even one of those things where just something went wrong and there's nothing that can be done, nothing that can be changed. I don't like feeling out of control. I don't like feeling like I can't fix it. And so therefore I have to be mad at someone and I can't be mad at me. So I'm going to be mad at the poor sucker that gets in the way. And this feels very similar to that in the sense that neither one of them stole the jewels. Neither one of them is at fault for the situation they happen to find themselves in, but Laura doesn't usually relinquish control, and she did this time and it went wrong. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy for her. Every time she trusts or she lets go or she allows herself to be vulnerable, something goes wrong. And it might not be his fault, but he's the poor sucker in the way. and he's getting the full front of the brunt of her anger. Even though I don't think she ever thought he was responsible, though. I don't think it ever crossed her mind, not just because she trusted him enough to do the whole thing in the first place. I don't think she would have even let him anywhere near Royal Ovulate if she thought there was a chance he was going to abscond with them, but partly also because there wasn't a second that he's been out of her sight, really, for him to have pulled a bait and switch. He was with her the entire way when they got knocked over, when they opened the thing. Like, I don't know, it seems to me that this is one of the few times where she defended him to Clarissa, saying, well, Mr. Steele's an expert too. Like, she's backed him every step, not showing any signs that she doubts his actions up until this point, where I think she's just mad. She's mad and she's got no one to be mad at, so she's going to be mad at him, and it sucks for him.
And this is the point that I had mentioned earlier about how I was going to reference back to LG, because this is the same conversation, and you brought this up, and I was, like I said, I was thinking about this as I was editing that episode this morning, because it was through that section of the discussion where they were in the back of the cab, and she talks about giving up control.
Yes.
And guess what?
Yeah.
Brian Allen Lane wrote both of these.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. So yeah, he's obviously.
It's nice that he brought that forward and carried that theme forward into this. I think there were other major issues, but at least that he did.
No, I agree with
do
you
a
on
nice
that
job
one.
on. So anyway,
and both episodes, Steele carries a gun and with the intention of using it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, after Laura has her little tirade, there's a moment of silence, and then Steele asks if she ever has dreams, about them, about their lives. And cautiously, slowly, probably not sure where the non sequitur is coming from or where it's going, she says, I suppose sometimes. And Steele continues, well, I've had some dreams recently, troubling at first, but now I realize they've helped me put some things in perspective. I finally understand that I've stayed not for the promise of what a relationship might be, but for what the reality of it is.
I wish the dreams better reflected that.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. He's grateful that he's not stuck on a couch somewhere watching an undisclosed sport with her pregnant to the nines, and he's grateful that maybe he's not with a beautiful blonde rejecting her sexual advances in France. I don't know, that one's but it just feels, if the dreams were intended to make him grateful for what he has, I'm not sure they succeeded.
Yeah. I'm going to read my note here. It seems almost that he's ready to accept their relationship as it is, where it is, irrespective of how it isn't what he desires for the relationship or what his desires for the relationship are. And it would seem that he's progressed much farther than Laura, who's determined that she will only accept it as she demands it to be and nothing less. And yet, that last dream of his also seems to betray that notion in that it seems to be defeatist in tone, fearful of what their relationship might become based on the reality of what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a shame, because I really like that line. I like his realization that, like, I'm happy where I am and I don't need anything more at this point. But it feels like we weren't given what we needed to get there.
Yeah. So anyway, but as always the case, this intimate moment is interrupted.
Well, it's their fault. They keep having them in coffins and weird pipes and stuff. Like, they need to start having intimate moments in, like, I don't know, the living room.
Yeah. Well, the casket begins rocking as we see the two workmen from before placing it on a cart and then rolling it down the hallway to the cremation room. They load it into the furnace, close the grate, and turn up the flames to extra well done. Inside, Laura...
Inside, that they put the coffin on a wheelie thingy. I'm a writer. They put it on a wheelie thingy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And not only that, you're an English teacher.
Yeah.
Inside, Laura and Steele realize what's going on, and they begin shouting, "We're here! We are here! We are here!" No, wait. Boil that dust back. Boil that dust. Anyway, the workmen don't hear. They're off getting their coffee. Steele tells Laura to hold him tight, and she chastises him, saying that this is hardly the time. But he clarifies, "Start rocking." So I guess this would be the time to use the phrase, "If the casket's rocking, don't come knocking."
I think that actually they want people to come a knocking. I think that's the whole point.
Anyway, they get the casket rocking, and it starts moving toward the grated door on the furnace. And then the two workmen watch as Laura and Steele manage to rock the casket out of the furnace onto the floor, where they push the cover open. They stand up, and Steele tells the two astounded workers that they really ought to think about using microwaves, far more fuel efficient.
That's gonna give them nightmares for the rest of their professional lives. Like, I bet these coffin workers, these funeral home workers, like anytime they put a coffin, like they're about to put it in the machine, they're probably knocking on it, going, "Hello, anybody in there?" Like,
well. Again, I have to say this, this has got to be one of the worst run funeral homes in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, you put it in the furnace, and then you don't bother to latch the gate. There's, yeah.
Well, they're not expecting the bodies to fight back, I guess.
I guess. Anyway, next we are back at the Sentry Towers. Laura and Steele exit the elevator, headed to their office, but there's not a soul around. Steele suggests that if someone had gone to the trouble to try and kill them twice in the same day, they must be on the right track. Laura has a theory. Todd and his father steal the jewels. Todd plans on hiding them in the fish tank, but then his father dies, and Todd decides to secrete the jewels in his ashes. But Steele doesn't quite buy it. After all, if he's got the jewels and they keep spoiling his hiding spots, why doesn't he just run? Laura says perhaps he doesn't have the jewels yet. A tacit suggestion that there's a third party involved. Having arrived back at the office, they walk and hobble into Steele's inner office, only to find Mildred in his chair, feet propped up on his desk. She hops up, but Steele tells her to stay. The way things are going, that chair could be hers sooner than she thinks. This seems a little out of character for Mildred because it's presumptuous.
Plus, I don't know. Actually, this tracked for me, given that with her pretending to be a detective when she went into the circus, and the fact that later on in Hounded Steele, she's telling her friends, I could see her like secretly, she's not expecting them back yet, right? So she's like sitting there imagining herself as a detective sitting in the chair. She jumps up guiltily. She was not thinking that she was going to get caught. So
that's true. Well, but the other thing is that she's left the outer office attendant. Now, Mildred is kind of a stickler for things. Fair. And even if it is after hours,
but she also goes to weird lunches and dates.
Well, that's true.
She is a walking contradiction, wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in whoever's writing her. Like,
all right,
depends on the day.
Fine, I give up. Anyway, Mildred says that given the situation, she thought she should burn a little bit of midnight oil. And Laura asks, "How's it burning?" Lots of smoke, but apparently no real fire. The lab report came in, but she can't make any sense of it. And Laura reads off the ingredients, Spartina essence and methotrichlorothiazine. Never mind. That's wrong. Whatever it is. It's the scent of an underwater plant mixed with a chemical binder. Well, the light dawns on Laura. This would allow a scent to be applied to a solid object, like royal avulite. Well, Mildred still doesn't get it, but Steele does. And without further explanation, Remington and Laura take off. Next, it's night. Remington and Laura are back at the lagoon, searching through the mud in the area where the swans had been penned while the lagoon was being drained during the initial.
It's not just mud they're searching through.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, you're right. It's not just mud. Anyway, so they begin finding the stones one at a time. And while Steele marvels at the swan's digestive system, Laura sympathizes that they probably wondered what hit them when they smelled their favorite underwater flora but tasted royal avulite instead.
Yeah.
As they finish collecting the gems, Laura removes a business card from the pocket of her crime clothes and places it on the ground. After all, when Todd Doak finds his jewels missing, they want him to know where to find them. Well, they're back at Remington's apartment. Steele and Laura are finishing up their job of cleaning the gems and getting just a bit frustrated at Todd's tardiness in showing up.
I mean, it is rude, right?
Yes.
Like, they left him a note,
Yeah. They did everything but drive him over. If he doesn't show up, they've got a problem. They can't return the jewels without being accused of having stolen them in the first place. And in that case, Steele would love to teach Laura Shem de fer. The door buzzer sounds, and Laura just calls out, "It's open." Todd Doak enters, gun in hand, and demands the gems. But Steele asks, "Well, what's the rush? The funeral home's not open for a few hours yet. You were planning on hiding the stones in your father's ashes, weren't you?" Sadly, Todd states that that's the irony of it. Todd had only gotten involved with the scheme as a favor to his father. He wanted to lead the high life before his heart gave out on him. But you know what they say about the best laid plans of mice and men. Laura commends the plan as being brilliant. I mean, after all, putting the fake stones in the lagoon long before anybody ever got there, and then making Laura and Steele think that the real ones were fake, angering Steele so that he'd grab for the stones and they could fall or be thrown into the lagoon where the swans would gobble them up. Steele points down to the stones, offering them to Todd without any challenge. Todd steps over, picks them up, and admires them as his father's legacy, and he'll just show himself out. Suddenly, Mildred bursts forth from the dining room, gun in one hand, portable tape recorder in the other, and shouts, "Drop it, Buster!"
I love this.
"I got it all, Chief."
She's so proud of herself.
Yeah. Well, Steele gives her an A-OK sign, but then Clarissa comes through the French doors saying, "No, not quite all."
And here's where Clarissa explains it all.
Oh.
I've been waiting this whole episode to make that joke. I've been waiting. You didn't get my Proclaimers reference or my Married with Children reference, but you got that one.
Well,
You
because
are a
I've
mystery,
heard the
sir.
title. I haven't seen any of those shows, any of them, not a single one, but I've heard the title. So, and it didn't occur to me until you just dropped it. And it's like, oh man.
Sorry.
But anyway, Steele's not at all surprised to see Clarissa saying, "It had to be you. Who else could convince a boring old bookworm like Archie Doak that he was missing out on the finer things in life?" And Clarissa's pretty callous. She says, "He was a nice man, but he was so short-sighted. So when he lost his wife, he came to treasure our friendship." And then she instructs Todd to bring her the jewels. Steele instructs Mildred that if Todd moves, shoot him. But of course, Clarissa knows that Mildred wouldn't harm a fly. And then, of course, there's the whole thing about how it's really not kosher to shoot somebody who's unarmed, especially if they've got their back to you. And anyway, Todd slowly moves toward Clarissa. Mildred, on the one hand, wanting to please Steele, but on the other hand, not wanting to shoot somebody who's nearly crying when she admits that she can't do it.
She can't bluff because she's willing to. And we'll get ahead of ourselves, but the Christmas episode where she's got the gun, I think she was willing there, but she was facing down someone who also had a gun. And as you pointed out here, Todd's not armed, and I think Clarissa, rightfully so, calls her bluff on it.
Yeah. Well, Steele consoles her, telling her not to worry about it. Todd hands the stones to Clarissa, and she tells Laura that if it's any consolation, she and Steele did a bang-up job. And she gleefully laughs as she tells them that they were so good that she's going to have to kill them, loose ends.
She's a sociopath. If Archie and Todd Doak are opportunists, she's a full-on sociopath.
Yeah, probably, yes.
Yeah.
Laura realizes that although it was Todd who locked Laura in the snake tank, it was Clarissa who locked her and Remington in the coffin. Clarissa explains that following them around was starting to get risky. And she figured that, well, if Steele and Laura were missing and the jewels were missing, it would be case closed. But since it didn't work out that way, it's time for plan B. Clarissa turns, pointing her gun at Mildred, taking her immediate attention off of Laura and Steele, which gives Steele an opportunity. He drops to the floor, grabs the throw rug that Clarissa and Todd are standing on, and yanks it out from underneath them. They go falling back, and within a moment, Steele is on Todd and Laura on Clarissa. The battle royale begins, but then the battles devolve into separate battles and get separated, with Todd and Steele remaining in the living room. Clarissa and Laura moving out onto the balcony. Todd gets away from Steele, runs out to join Clarissa, who is attempting to make her escape via a rope that was hanging over the side of the balcony, which is presumably how she climbed up in the first place. Steele runs out, grabs Todd, and body slams him onto the patio table, but Todd, like a pro wrestler, recovers effortlessly from what should have been a serious hurt.
Yeah.
The fight continues between Steele and Doak and Clarissa and Laura until Clarissa and Laura both go completely over the railing of the balcony.
Thus answering the question, can you fall off Mr. Steele's balcony and survive? Apparently you can.
Steele, having dispatched Todd, turns and realizes that Laura has fallen off the building and fearfully shouts her name. Then we are in another dream. It's a funeral. A casket is on the ground, attended by Remington, Mildred, and a minister. Steele has a bouquet of flowers. Mildred has what looks to be a somewhat uncompleted Christmas door ornament. Steele is wearing a dark suit and dark sunglasses. Mildred is wearing black, though wrapped in what seems like might be an expensive fur. The minister gives an extremely short eulogy, drops a handful of dirt on the top of the casket, and then pulls off his collar and leaves. Apparently, if Laura Nora can't pull any more of a crowd than this, he's not going to bother hanging around either.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
Maybe he works on a commission, based on how many people attend.
Yeah.
Steele and Mildred place their memorials on top of the casket and then begin to walk back toward the limousine, which is parked a respectful distance away. Mildred sadly says, if only her mother could have been here. Steele excuses Abigail's absence, saying, it was her bridge day. Or her sister Frances. Well, understandable. She was right in the middle of redoing her den. Steele casually admits that death can be so inconvenient at times, but he's sure Laura would understand.
Calling her Laura.
Mildred is crying, so Steele pulls out his handkerchief and hands it to her. She blows her nose into it, then hands it back to Steele, who is somewhat disgusted at the notion that his handkerchief was being used for, what it was intended for.
Yeah, exactly.
Mildred's tears have momentarily stopped as she bemoans the fact that life is so unfair. Clarissa falls from your balcony, and now she and Todd will be out of jail in just a few years, ready to renew their lives. But our poor Miss Holt. And as the tears begin to flow again, Steele puts his arm around her, seemingly to console her. But it's really just a covert way to sneak a peek at his watch. Obviously, he's got someone else he's eager to get to. Mildred turns her concern to Steele, who she is sure must be devastated, wondering how on earth he will ever get along without Laura. He starts to speak, pauses, looking toward the limo, and then with a false solemnness assures Mildred that he'll get by. He hugs her, gives her a kiss on each cheek, turns, and then begins walking toward the limo, lowering his glasses as he proceeds. And then we see what he's looking at, or rather, who he's looking at. It's the blonde of his dreams.
Yeah.
She's in the limo, champagne at the ready. He gets to the limo, opens the door. The blonde hands him his glass of champagne, and suddenly there's a shrill scream of, "Hey!" It's Laura. She is standing up in the coffin, pointing accusingly at him, and she warns him, "Don't think you can get rid of me that easily, Mr. Steele." As she begins walking toward him, he casually asks, "Dinner and a movie, Miss Holt?" "Why not?" The blonde gets out of the other door of the limo, angry look on her face. She slams the door shut and walks off. Steele hands the glass of champagne to Laura, who takes a drink as Steele tells her, bottoms up, although he doesn't seem very enthused.
So, okay, this is another... All of these dreams are so...
Problematic.
There are parts of this one that I could see making more sense for Laura, that are less vicious, less cruel, although it is still sort of cruel to assume that he would be bringing his date to their funeral, right?
But that's kind of maybe how she sees him.
I can see she sees him as having one foot out the door. And the fact that she envisions her family not showing up also shows us that she is aware that her life is not filled with the same people that normally fill somebody's life. Like, she and her sister aren't close. Her mother is somebody she actively avoids. And Steele is somebody who she's still not sure of, and that kind of comes through here a little bit more so than the other dreams, which just seem mean. So in that particular sense, I can see kind of where this is coming from. Her jumping out of the grave and being like, "Not so fast, mister." I guess you could maybe interpret that as her deciding to fight for what she wants, maybe. But
Yeah, that would be fair.
It could have been done a little better, especially since, like you said, in the dream, he doesn't look too thrilled once his blonde storms off.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost as if but then she winks at the camera and smiles like in the hospital bed. So it's what? Okay. It's just it's a weird way to end this and a weird episode in and of itself. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, next we do see, as you allude to, Laura's face and head wrapped in medical gauze, a large smile on her face.
Like, is this her version of a good dream?
I guess, yeah.
Okay.
So then we hear a voice saying, "Lucky girl." And then we see that there's a doctor with Mildred and Steele. And the doctor continues explaining that the hedge broke her fall. She'll be fine, but we should let her get some sleep. I don't know.
She'll be fine. She looks like she's in a full body cast.
Yeah. How many floors up is he? He's multiple. I don't think a hedge would be enough to break a fall.
At least 2 stories from what we know. But yeah.
Anyway, the doctor turns to leave. Mildred follows. Steele hangs back for a moment, and then he also turns to leave. He pauses at the door, partially turns around, looking at Laura, and softly says, "Sweet dreams, Miss Holt." Laura, with one eye open, responds, "You too, Mr. Steele." Then she closes her eye and drifts off to sleep. And that's the episode.
Yep. It's definitely not my, again, I don't hate it, but it's certainly not my favorite.
No, it's
I think dream sequences are hard to pull off as it is. And this one, it feels like they're not sure what to do with the dreams, or they're going for the most obvious interpretation, but it doesn't make them look very good. Either one of them.
Yeah, I think that I think the concept of the episode was okay. I don't think the execution was well done.
Yeah.
So that's all I'll say about that. Although I do have to say that how to put this, I rank LG and Steele as a very low episode on my rating scale, and this one's right down there with it. It may actually be lower than LG.
I definitely prefer LG over this one,
simply because of the execution.
Yeah,
I think this one I could have liked a lot better than LG if it had just been done differently.
I'm kind of wondering if Brian Allen Lane has really has a full grasp of these people yet. It feels like he sometimes hits the mark and sometimes misses it. Well, I guess we'll see going forward what he does.
But see, that's why you have an executive story editor like Michael Gleason. They're supposed to catch these things and line them up. And it seems like this one just kind of fell through the cracks. So I don't know.
That's fair.
I don't know. Anyway, that's the end of the episode. That's all I've got. Yeah, got anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, well, we'll just wrap it up and tell everybody to remember about our website, www.SteeleWatching.com. There you will find show notes and links to Ocean's 11 for both the Amazon Canada and Amazon USA store, and links to other resources such as
our Facebook fan page, our Twitter, Instagram, as well as the officially unofficial Steele Watchers Facebook group, who are just a bunch of crazy Remington Steele fans that hang out and talk about the show and share videos and fan fictions and all kinds of other cool stuff. So you should join us there.
Absolutely, positively. So next episode, Woman of Steel, which is one of those that has some musical edits.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, it is definitely one of those. It's also partly written by Susan Baskin. So we've got our...
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
had not
she's
looked
one
at
of
that.
the writers.
Okay.
This one has 3 writers listed, but she's one of them. So
Hmm.
it'll be interesting to compare this one with Steel Sweet on You, which I wasn't as fond of as others are, and Vintage, because the Woman of Steel is less comedy based than her other 2 offerings. So
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that's it. So we will see everybody later. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. Eric and Sara here. Just a quick announcement to let you know that, yes, we do appreciate everyone who listens, participates, and supports the podcast in whatever way you do. But we wanted to give an extra thank you to those who are so graciously giving to be monthly financial supporters.
We are making live streams of our recording sessions available to anyone who is a monthly financial supporter. So not only can you watch us live as we record our podcast episodes, you will be getting access to the raw, behind-the-scenes, unedited version of episodes before they get officially released.
And Sara, does that include our mistakes and screw-ups and our humiliating?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Every
it does.
single one of them.
Every single one of them, yes. So again, this is just an extra thank you to those who are going above and beyond. But whether you choose to become a monthly financial supporter or not, we still love you. We want to say we thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your feedback.
If you want to become a monthly financial supporter, please visit our website at www.steelewatching.com to sign up.